NWO diet is the biggest part of the solution to the healthcare crisis we are facing worldwide. What's coming in the next few years is going to dramatically change the long-term health outcomes of several generations worth of people.
This is for the people that actually have brains. If you eat sentient animals, you will have sentience. Those that don't eat sentient animals lack sentience. That's a pretty good heuristic to realize.
What?
Ridiculous diet. And I'm talking about explosive diet. And that's just gonna be all over the damn place.
Oh my God. Shit everywhere. There's shit everywhere!
I've had rocketing diarrhea.
From meat? That's
from all meat, yeah.
Damn it! There's shit on the windows! Oh my God! My house is full of shit! He shit everywhere! Look what he did! He shit all over the wall!
I've had rocketing diarrhea.
From meat? That's
from all meat, yeah.
When can you do it? How about tonight at 8?
Great, thanks. Thank you, boys. I gotta go upstairs. I gotta go upstairs to come leave. See you at 8.
You think you might have appendicitis?
Well, my stomach's rumbling and I'm having these shooting pains.
Okay, maybe I should take you to the hospital.
No, I'll be all right. It makes me all queasy and...
You might notice diarrhea. That's like a common thing in both the keto and carnivore communities to warn people to never trust a...
Oh, wow. Yeah, you know what? I think I feel a little better.
When you're starting keto or carnivore.
That actually stain the toilet bowl like if it was turmeric.
0 gas, 0 bloating. I fuck twice a day. At a time of my own choosing, by the way.
I don't know about you, but I seriously don't on the carnivore diet. I don't feel like I've really farted. I don't think I did on keto or GAPS either.
I'll tell you one thing, I do not trust my butthole at all. When I feel coming on, I'm like, oh, this could be a disaster.
The thread title is Disaster Pants.
Oh, really?
In my belly. It's like it's gross. And I've had food poisoning 3 times already. In 5 weeks. Like, this is a nightmare diet for anybody.
Hey guys, so here's a question that a friend of mine posted on Facebook. Why do you care so much if people decide to follow science, or rather people's opinions and such, instead of actual objective evidence? At least partially into this film, and definitely by the end of this film, you are going to fully and thoroughly understand exactly what constitutes actual meaning of evidence and why exactly it is so absolutely critical and so absolutely vital in the predicament that we currently find ourselves, especially in the state of the online health conscious community. So strap in, get ready. We're going to go extremely deep, and we're going to sort out we're going to settle this mystery once and for all. Why is it so important to other people to have to believe in scientific peer-reviewed evidence, as opposed to personal anecdote or just anyone's random opinion? Okay, so the question that we're asking here is, why does evidence matter more than opinion? Which should be very obvious, especially when it comes to life and death situations such as health and nutrition information. You don't want to be taking advice from just a random person that you can't even see their face, you don't even know who they are, just some random person on Twitter and on Instagram and on Facebook or on social media or on Reddit or anywhere else for that matter? Why do you just trust some random person's opinion when especially social media influencers are so prone to being motivated by objectives such as selling products or ebooks or supplements or what have you? It's just not ethical, or it's not reasonable to take advice from some random person. So let's answer your question, Beth. Diet and nutrition and lifestyle medicine is actually the cutting edge, the leading forefront of, human health and wellness. And that is, diet and nutrition are literally the leading causes of death on planet Earth, not just for humans, but literally for all life. Literally the entire ecosystem and the biosphere is dependent upon, what we eat and our diet and lifestyle choices. And so our choices currently are the leading causes of death in the world. So that's why it's important, and that's why it matters. And the reason why I care, why people are being misled and lied to and listening to all these carnivore dieters and the flat earthers and all these other relativists and people who literally provide zero evidence. They have no evidence to support any of their very dangerous claims. For example, the carnivore dieters, they've got so many followers all saying that meat heals and my personal experience and my personal anecdote, says that it makes me feel better. Well, the reason why stories are unreliable and not a reason why we should make life and death decisions such as diet and lifestyle choices is the same reason why I could tell you a story about, my uncle goes out and drives drunk every single night and he's never had an accident and killed anyone. So therefore, you should also go out and drive drunk because, hey, his experience though, his personal experience, it's not dangerous for him. Well, that's not, would we give that advice to anybody because of one person's personal anecdote?
I'm sorry, right, anecdotal evidence, right, I could take anecdotal evidence from 100 people, right, who were my friends, right, and get them to say anything.
Good, absolutely.
So for 6 years I was a vegetarian. It didn't work out for me for health reasons. I became really quite anemic and quite poorly when I was little.
Well, that's just an anecdote.
I had a really low immune system.
That's an anecdote. We have the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, one of the most credible organisations on health on earth, and they say a vegan diet can be healthy for all stages of life, including infancy,
There's
pregnancy,
quite a
adulthood.
few in the media recently where quite a few famous influencers as well have had the same effects, where
That's
it's
an
just
anecdote.
not working
That's not
out
science.
for their health at the minute. So they've actually changed back to a meat-based diet.
But would you accept, Joey, that you would have to plan your diet a bit more
All diets
carefully?
need to be planned. Are you going to go out and eat sausage rolls and burgers and Pringles? All diets should be appropriately planned.
Look, anecdotes are anecdotes, even if they're published as case reports in medical literature. It's all about the science. You saying I feel great is someone else saying my uncle lived to be 110 smoking cigarettes every day, therefore smoking is fine. Well, smoking was fine for them, but if you look at the actual science, smoking on average is really bad because about 8 years off your life and increases risk. Blah, blah, blah. We know that, right? So, it's just like wearing a seatbelt won't guarantee you're not going to die in a car crash, right? Someone could say, well, I knew someone wore the seatbelt, died in a car crash. Well, yeah, that's not an argument against wearing your seatbelt because we know that reduces our risk, and that's why we do it. And the same thing with a healthy diet. No guarantee that you're not going to get cancer or diabetes or whatever, but dramatically reduces risk. Just like 1 in 10 people get lung cancer never smoked in their lives. And so you look at the science, we look at the best available balance of evidence, and you say, this is the diet that is most likely to improve my health and longevity, period. Now, it's great to have that inner, we hear about all the data, and it's nice to have that personal experience. And that's why I encourage people, look, give it a couple of weeks, right? Like the 21-day Kickstart program from Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. And again, it's just like, well, give it a couple of weeks, give it 3 weeks, right? Give it a try. You'll never know how good you feel until you try it. And even if you're healthy, right? Even if you're not battling some disease, so you're getting, lab work before and after, because then we can really show you what the diet can do. Even if you're healthy, people all the time come back to me and say, oh my God, I thought I was healthy, but I just thought it was normal to have upset stomach after meal. But all of a sudden their digestion's better. All of a sudden their sleep's better. All of a sudden their energy's better. And so then they have that internal motivation to stick with it to get those long-term benefits, like reducing the risk of most of our top leading killer diseases. Now, having said all that, if you personally don't experience that, then you have to figure out why. So you have to say, well, okay, if you're cutting out all that junk, what are you replacing with? So, for example, it's rare, about 1 in 250 people or so, 1 in 500 have a soy allergy, for example, right? But they've never eaten a soybean in their life. But then all of a sudden, they started eating plant-based, and so they basically eat like soy-based versions of everything. And so all of a sudden, they're getting all the soy, and little did they know their whole lives they've really been allergic to soy. And all of a sudden, they feel horrible. And they're like, wow, when I stopped eating my burger, I felt horrible, so obviously the burger was awesome. It's like people going on this carnivore diet. You just eat meat. I mean, if you had celiac disease, or if you were allergic to citrus, for example, you just ate meat and all of a sudden you feel so much better. It's not the meat. It's all this, little did you know that, you're just intolerant of X, Y, or Z. But we can certainly get at that. So you can have the best of both worlds, a healthy diet. It says you're going to improve your health and longevity.
Number 3. Storytelling is not considered evidence. I always assume positive intent and honesty until I'm shown evidence to the contrary. So when people tell me stories, I believe they're true. I remember doing a talk at a bookstore in Boston one time, and this guy said, when it was time for the Q&A, my uncle ate bacon, eggs, and cheese 3 times a day, lived to be 94 years old, and died in his sleep. I believe him. Okay, I've heard I had a flu shot last year and I didn't get the flu. But here's my point. These are people telling their stories. And this is considerably different than looking at a large body of evidence to determine what is likely to happen to a big number of people who engage in the same behavior. So let's look at the bacon, eggs, and cheese. If you look at the evidence, you really look at a lot of research studies, it is not likely that most of us are going to get away with eating bacon, eggs, and cheese 3 times a day and live to be 94 years old. So, we have to separate the storytelling from the real thing. It's not all the time, and it's even done by doctors who should know better. Lauren Cordain's The Paleo Diet is largely supported with stories of people who gave up pizza and cupcakes and started eating wild elk and deer and lost weight. Others engage in conjecture related to the paleo diet about what people ate 6 million years ago while wandering the earth looking for food. The stories and conjecture are pretty meaningless, and I don't understand why we even debate what people ate 6 million years ago, because we know exactly what people are eating right now, and we pretty much know their health outcomes too. So here's the thing. I've given you a few examples, but one of the things that I think differentiates what we're doing here, and this is what we teach both consumers and we teach healthcare practitioners as well, is how to apply specific criteria for filtering and evaluating information. These are just examples of how we apply the filters. This helps consumers make a lot of sense out of the massive amount of contradictory information they're confronted with about health every day. And it reduces the amount of time we spend responding to critics, to tell you the truth. I mean, when people send me hate mail about things I say on this channel, for example, I invite them to bring their studies. I've even told people, I'll fly you to Columbus. We'll be on YouTube together. We can have a debate. I'm going to send you some criteria for the types of studies we can consider for our debate. Guess how many of them have appeared on YouTube with me? Now, if you've been watching for a while, you know the answer to that question. None, because people don't want to engage in a debate when there are rules associated with the debate. But without rules, we just degenerate, like I said, back to the he said, she said, they said, the neighbor said. And you can't get anywhere doing that. In our world, rules are employed to govern everything, ranging from sports to how corporations are run and laws are passed. In the absence of rules, chaos results. Enterprising charlatans take advantage of chaos to sell their ideas about diet and health, and this can be stopped by applying objective rules and evaluating all of these things.
It's about the totality of the evidence. That's what the science is. It's the collective experience of everybody, not just you. And not just me, which are 1 and n equals 1. Anecdote is unreliable because of each person has at least 12 different cognitive biases that could and infinite confounding factors that could be determining why they feel better or what their personal belief that why they think this thing may or may not be good or bad for them is because the personal opinion is usually entirely uninformed, inaccurate, misguided. People have all sorts of hidden agendas and hidden motives, such as lying to people for money, nefarious purposes, on and on and on.
And you see it almost every time someone who's actually informed has a conversation with one of these influencers. Like, they're not being 100% accurate, objective, or even honest in a lot of cases.
Misalignment, Elise Parker, just uploaded a video. I tried the carnivore diet for 30 days, ex-vegan. Her video has even been covered by mainstream media like Fox News. So today we are going to talk about this dangerous and, as you will see, unlawful video that she posted. So in case it wasn't obvious to some of you, which is understandable, I want to point out the fact that Elise is just a paid actress in a commercial brought to you by this unethical company, ButcherBox. A company whose CEO has made $30 million in just 2 years, furthering disease in humans, animal exploitation, and the destruction of the environment. A company that has an abysmal reputation and alarming reviews on Yelp, which we will get to later. In 1 year, the company paid out over $1 million in commission to affiliates like Elise. This is her affiliate link and page, which is linked from the description of her video. So, how much is this carnivore being paid? Well, after being on YouTube for over a decade, I estimate she is being paid $20,000 or more for starring in this commercial. Recently, the FTC released updated guidelines outlining rules around paid sponsorships, and as we know, Elise doesn't research anything.
I've never, ever been the person to research and research and research before doing something.
Yes, we remember.
I spent the next 4 years reading as many scientific articles as I could get my hands on to try and figure out the underlying cause of my mysterious illnesses. I've read thousands of papers. They eventually led me to the conclusion that gluten could be irritating my gut, and maybe that was causing an immune response.
So this is another lie. Michaela's claiming that she has spent countless hours, she has read thousands of scientific papers on diet, health, autoimmune function, and based on reading all of this scientific research, she has come to the conclusion that her carnivore diet or her lion diet is ideal for treating at least her specific autoimmune issues. Well, that is not true. She does not read any scientific research pretty much at all, and she admitted this to me in an email. So I emailed her asking if she would be interested in debating what diet is best for human health, a vegan or carnivore diet. She responded, "I'm not sure. I don't know if it would be helpful. I'm not interested in debating the science, quote unquote, behind either diet, although Paul Saladino might be. The medical community failed me, so I don't care what scientific papers say. So I don't know what we would talk about. What are you thinking?" So what a stark contrast. On YouTube, publicly, you have no shame in stating, "Oh man, I've spent countless hours researching, I've read thousands of scientific papers, I have this huge wealth of knowledge on nutrition and autoimmune disease." But then privately, when the public can't see, when someone challenges you to a debate, challenges you to support your claims with evidence, you say, "Oh, I'm scientifically illiterate, I don't know too much about science, I don't even trust science. You see, science failed me, so I try to avoid science. So I'm not really interested in debating this topic because I don't know what I'm talking about."
And you see it almost every time someone who's actually informed has a conversation with one of these influencers. Like, they're not being 100% accurate, objective, or even honest in a lot of cases.
And I just want to take this moment to highlight just how important this conversation and discussion is, because literally every time, pretty much almost every single day, I log onto my Facebook pages or my Facebook groups, and anytime you see any type of discussion being generated by anti-vegans, low-carbers, carnivore dieters, paleo, what have you, any type of meathead type person or anti-vegan type person, you will constantly, this is how the discussion will always roll out, is anytime you challenge them or press them for any type of evidence whatsoever, whether it's any type of evidence, any type of cited reference, any type of reference whatsoever, they will simply just come out and with the conspiracy that, oh, well, no, all science is actually all corrupt, all science is fake, all science is fraud, all science is funded by the government conspiracy. They think that PubMed, peer-reviewed literature, is published and archived on government database websites just to archive these studies, automatically attribute that as they think that the government has automatically funded all studies that have ever existed, and they think that the government, every study is a government-funded study, and they think it's all just a giant conspiracy and it's all fake and it's all fraud. And yet when you challenge them for what evidence backs up their opinions about health, so how do they know anything is real for certain at all? And so that's where, I'm done with research, I only go off my own experience, but thanks for your opinion on your beliefs. So they're trying to say that the actual objective evidence, the majority of the evidence, they're trying to say that, oh, that's just your opinion and your belief, which is what all they have. So they're trying to bring you down, trying to bring the highest evidence down to their level of the lowest quality evidence that we have, which is personal experience, though, or personal anecdote. They will always say, oh yeah, I don't actually do any research.
And as we know, Elise doesn't research anything.
I've never, ever been the person to research and research and research before doing something.
Yes, we remember.
She does not read any scientific research pretty much at all, and she admitted this to me in an email.
Oh no, actually science is all fraud and it's all corrupt. I don't even trust science. And this is their constant. It doesn't matter who you talk to. It doesn't matter who you actually try to get to engage with a public discussion or in a public debate about the actual facts. They will all just come out and say, oh no, this is it. I got in a huge discussion with this with Phil Escott also. So I've got countless examples of these. I could show you screenshot after screenshot. Literally every single day on my Facebook page, there are tons of these posts and they go viral and everyone is all jumping on the bandwagon. And look, I mean, it's okay to be the village idiot, but it's not okay for everyone to rally around the village idiot for health advice. I mean, it's okay. I mean, the village idiot can be a great, loving person, but we don't go to the village idiot and all rally and gather around them and asking them for, holistic nutritional health advice. It's absolutely insane. And so this is what they always do. They always reject any type of evidence, reference, citations whatsoever because they don't have any. Instead, all they do is say, oh, the science isn't my thing. I don't do research. I just go off my own personal experience, though.
I've never, ever been the person to research and research and research before doing something.
Yes, we remember.
And the problem is they have no evidence to inform that their personal experience is even competent whatsoever. And so what they do instead is they tell you, oh no, I don't like science, but you go and debate Paul Saladino instead. And the problem with that is when you actually try to debate Paul Saladino and Chris Masterjohn, they don't have any science whatsoever either. All they have is their own personal podcasts, and every time I'm trying to get people to show actual references, anything to back up their claims, they send me a Paul Saladino podcast. And in that Paul Saladino podcast with Chris Masterjohn, there are zero cited references for anything that they claim whatsoever. It's all just their opinion. And Chris Masterjohn thinks he can get away with this because he's some kind of nutritional PhD outlier who's got all the answers, whereas the entire field of people who are actually publishing and reviewing the literature, oh no, they don't know. But Chris Masterjohn, who had to quit and instead became like some goofball online, like, oh no, he knows, and yet he doesn't cite any references whatsoever. So the problem is they're appealing to authority with Chris Masterjohn and the low-carb bosses, Paul Saladino, and they don't have any actual evidence.
I've never, ever been the person to research and research and research before doing something.
Yes, we remember. And as a result, she is not complying with these rules. That's right, the FTC is going after US influencers in a big way. These laws are in place to protect consumers from people like Elise who use deceptive, misleading marketing techniques to promote dangerous products and services to the public for money. ButcherBox has already been pulled up for deceptive advertising, and now it seems like they're at it again. The Federal Trade Commission is very clear about what is required of influencers and the importance of not misleading or withholding information from viewers. It is not enough to state that you are being sponsored for the video by slipping it into the description box. You need to state within the first 30 seconds or so that the video is sponsored by the company.
So today I've partnered with Maple Lodge Farms, who sponsored this video.
And ideally state that you are receiving money from the company. So the goal here is that the viewer is fully aware that they are viewing an ad. Saying this,
I've teamed up with ButcherBox to shed some light on how to source high-quality meat,
is not enough. Teaming up with ButcherBox to shed some light on sourcing high-quality meat is not disclosing that you're being paid for the ad.
And you see it almost every time someone who's actually informed has a conversation with one of these influencers. Like, they're not being 100% accurate, objective, or even honest in a lot of cases.
These are why stories and anecdote are not reliable and why we should not make life and death health decisions such as going on a carnivore diet or a low carb or a keto or a paleo diet or an all Twinkie diet or it doesn't matter. It's because the evidence is what matters, not personal story, because lots of people are dying from the leading number one cause of death on earth, which is heart disease. And that's why people who are giving unsubstantiated advice about health and diet and lifestyle nutrition is why it is very dangerous. And it is literally public health threat number one.
Diet is the biggest part of the solution to the healthcare crisis we are facing worldwide. What's coming in the next few years is going to dramatically change the long-term health outcomes of several generations worth of people.
All right, so rule number one, all experts are not created equal. One of my pet peeves is the media's tendency to present both points of view, which sounds like a good idea, but what it ends up being is an expert from each side. While the presentation of different viewpoints is a good idea, I agree, various experts should be well matched in terms of education and accomplishment, but this doesn't happen. Often two people who have widely divergent backgrounds and levels of expertise are presented as having equal standing.
I'm a combatives trainer. You yourself recognize that you're not a nutrition expert.
So a good example of this is a scientist like Colin Campbell, who's published over 300 articles in medical journals, presents evidence supporting a plant-based diet. And then the other side is presented by Gary Taubes, a columnist at the New York Times, who wrote a book on eating animal foods. Seriously, these are not equal. So
Chris Kresser tweeted that he'll be on the Joe Rogan podcast to debunk the Game Changers on November 19th.
Think of someone who could explain the nutrition required, like really explain, based on like a Chris Kresser guy, based on actual science.
So I forgot who this guy was, like what his background is. I pulled his LinkedIn page up today to refresh myself. And after his name, he's got the letters L.AC. And I forgot what that meant, so I looked it up. And it means that he is a licensed acupuncturist.
A doctor of acupuncture. Hey, fuckface, you didn't go to medical school. Stop calling yourself a doctor. Yeah. Doctor of acupuncture is so weird. It's like, I'm a doctor of comedy.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
You practice acupuncture. You're not a doctor. I think of someone who could explain the nutrition required, like really explain, based on like a Chris Kresser guy, based on actual science.
Do you not feel like, I'm a combatives trainer, you yourself recognize that you're not a nutrition expert?
And Chris was there in the studio audience to get beat up by the logic and facts of James. Anyway, James starts off masterfully by asking Chris for his credentials in nutrition.
Yes. Has any of your work or your ideas been published in the scientific literature?
No, I've never claimed that it has.
I just wondered. So
you didn't wonder.
No, I did wonder.
No,
I couldn't find anything.
But that's not why you were saying that. You were saying that to try to make it seem that he's less of an expert.
Well, he is. I'm not an expert either. So, Chris, would you consider yourself a nutrition expert?
No.
Right? You said that at the beginning.
I'm not a nutritionist. I have master's level training in nutrition. I would consider myself someone who is adept at reading the literature.
Do you?
So,
I mean, yeah.
So,
I mean, do you know how to read a forest plot?
Here it comes.
The moment of truth.
Yes or no?
I don't.
Yes or no?
I don't.
Fucking
what does that mean?
That's basically.
All right.
James Forest Plot Boots.
It's
Forest plot. Okay. Yeah, because it kind of looks like a bunch of
Forest
trees, right?
plot.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
You looked at the study that
I
you
have
referenced?
looked at the study.
Okay, so we don't know how to read it, so it's kind of.
So for everyone watching, from this point on, it's just an increasingly disastrous situation for Kresser. Like from here on, Wilkes just starts fucking bombarding him. It's hilarious.
Okay. What does that specifically mean, like master's level training in nutrition?
Right, thank you, Joe.
Well, in California, acupuncturists have a 4-year master's program, which includes a lot of medical sciences and nutrition, research methodology, etc.
So, you don't know how to read a forest plot. So, have you actually looked at the study that you referenced?
I have looked at the study.
Okay, so we don't know how to read it, so it's kind of. Would you consider yourself a nutrition expert?
No.
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 What?
No.
Various experts should be well matched in terms of education and accomplishment, but this doesn't happen. Often two people who have widely divergent backgrounds and levels of expertise are presented as having equal standing.
So, ladies and gentlemen, what we've got here is a guy with a bachelor's degree in social change and communication and a licensed acupuncturist who's going to debunk a film with the cast featuring 12 medical doctors and 6 PhDs.
Seriously, these are not equals.
Y'all know what time it is. Red pill vegan. Next.
You know, we saw it with the Joel Kahn discussion, and you see it almost every time someone who's actually informed has a conversation with one of these influencers. Like, they're not being 100% accurate, objective, or even honest in a lot of cases.
Because I've come in here, and people are saying, oh, what are you going to say to that debunk? Chris did not debunk the film. He made misrepresentations of our claims, and he got things factually wrong. Lower rates of cancer. That's what he's implying. When you put something in quotes, what does that mean to you?
It means that's what he said.
Yeah, but it's that quotation is quoting the study, right? Fair enough? Is that what they said in the study?
No, that's not what they said in the study. That was
right.
My summary of the evidence.
Right, thank you.
I can't get over how funny that is. I'm just actually quoting myself.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like
misleading.
That's his funnier. Here, listen to Joe for a second.
Okay, fine. Okay, let's go with that.
Like,
okay, let's go.
But he's not putting things in quotes
no, so
saying
let's
that
go with
someone
that.
else said it.
He's not putting things in quotes saying someone else said it. Look at the bottom of that screen. Can we go to the archives? Because I actually it's in the smallest font possible.
It's a source, isn't it?
It's a source.
That's misleading as fuck.
Yeah.
Like we don't have to attribute bad actorship to him for it, but it's a mistake at minimum, and it's very misleading, regardless of whether it's intentional or not.
Let's go to quoting myself though, and for those of you who can't see, you can follow along in the archives.
Quoting myself though, I love it. Okay.
You said, I don't know, he didn't provide a reference for that, so it's hard to reject, but it contradicts the evidence. If that's not reflective of the preponderance of evidence, why did you open your ebook with it? Because this is how I can show that he's handpicking these studies to make his claim. You said that 92% of vegans were deficient in...
Let's read what it says.
This is from 16 years ago, by the way.
Okay.
And a very small study from 16 years ago. And this is why I show you that he's handpicking the data that he uses. And this is where I go back to the fact that it's about the interpretation of the totality of evidence, and you can't really rely on someone that's not a nutrition expert handpicking studies to suit their bias. Anyway, you got things factually wrong about B12. So to the people listening or watching, do you really want to put the interpretation of the data in the hands of someone that just got so many things wrong about B12?
And you see it almost every time someone who's actually informed has a conversation with one of these influencers. Like, they're not being 100% accurate, objective, or even honest in a lot of cases.
You come onto Joe's podcast, and you're supposed to, like, people are supposed to believe that you are the best person to, because you say it's about the meta-analyses and you say it's about the totality of evidence. We agree. What you're suggesting is that people should listen to your interpretation of the evidence when you get things factually wrong, unable to read a single study and understand it. I am not qualified either.
That's a mischaracterization.
Okay, then tell me with the confidence interval of this in the forest plot.
So, listen, I'm presenting. I've never.
You presented some studies. Anyone can say anything about studies.
I've not put myself out like I'm the expert.
Think of someone who could explain the nutrition like really explain, based on like a Chris Kresser guy, based on actual science. And you see it almost every time someone who's actually informed has a conversation with one of these influencers. Like, they're not being 100% accurate, objective, or even honest in a lot of cases.
Seriously, these are not equal. Who was saying that one of the reasons why she was uncomfortable maybe getting into the business of helping people with health is how confusing it was when so many experts think differently about so many things. And I told her, I said, you're exactly right. A lot of experts do have different opinions. So you have to have some way of sorting this out, because if not, you degenerate into, I call it the he said, she said. He said this and she said that. My doctor says this and your doctor says that. And this book says this and somebody else's book says that. And he said, she said, they said, my neighbor said, my uncle's best friend's neighbor's mother said. And you cannot ever sort that out. And it's both consumers and practitioners that find themselves in this difficult situation where you're just in this constant turmoil of trying to figure out what's right, and you can't hold on to a thought for very long before a contrary and competing idea comes along. And it is confusing. So we'll agree the public is confused about a lot of health-related issues. That's both consumers and practitioners. And confusion stands in the way of good decision-making. A lot of the confusion results from the fact that you can advocate for almost any diet, food, supplement, drug, or medical practice using studies and articles published in medical journals and presenting experts who support the claims made. There is something to support everything. Well, I've watched this go on for years, and I've spent an awful lot of time re-educating members on many issues after they've been exposed to information contrary to what they've learned from us. No one wins if the whole thing revolves around me citing studies and experts supporting my statements with the other side citing their studies and experts, and we're back to the he said, she said, and they said. There's no conclusion to be reached on almost any issue when an individual's or organization's point of view is the basis for making recommendations. And in fact, one of the things that is the bane of my existence, and it's like nails on a chalkboard for me, is the adoption of science as a point of view. It's resulted in a significant degeneration of how we talk about very important health-related issues.
Because they don't see it as something that is singular or objective. And it's extremely important to understand.
The great evil, in my humble opinion, which haunts our enterprise, and I say this realizing I'm setting the fox among the chickens, the great evil that has been allowed to flourish in the absence of mathematical understanding is relativism. What is relativism? It's the idea that there is no distinction between shit and shinola. That all ideas are somehow operating on equal footing. So one person is a chaos theorist, another is a follower of the revelations of this or that New Age guru, someone else is channeling information from the Pleiades, and we have been taught that political correctness demands that we treat all these things with equal weight. Because we have no mathematical ability, no logical ability, we don't know how to ask the questions that expose some positions as preposterous, trivial, insulting to the intelligence, and unworthy of repetition. So we all are very comfortable bashing science and flailing away at that, but that isn't our enemy. Science is capable of undertaking its own reformation and critique and has been engaged in that fairly vigorously for some time. The enemy that will really subvert the enterprise of building a world based on clarity is the belief that we cannot point out the pernicious forms of idiocy that flourish in our own community. And this problem is growing worse all the time. I mean, just pick up a copy of Magical Blend or Shaman's Drum, and you will discover an appeal to the level of intellect that makes what's going on with television advertising look like a meeting of the Princeton Institute of Advanced Study. We have tolerated too many loose heads in our community. We are not willing to take on the karma involved in argument and discourse that actually gores somebody's ox, so that at the end of the day, iridology or Mormonism or some other form of institutionally supported foolishness lies in shreds on the floor. We consider this politically incorrect. I can feel the tension in this room because people sense I might gore their particular ox. If we had learned mathematical logic or reason or rules of evidence, when someone approaches us excited to inform us that the ruins of Lemuria have been spotted in the deep sea off Big Sur or something like that, we would be able to respond to that with the contempt it deserves. I had a conversation about this recently with someone who, if I had to describe their job category, I would describe them as mafiosa. And I said, what do you think of the abduction phenomenon? And without hesitation, this person said, there are just so many foolish people in the world. And to me, all of these things are intelligence tests. And the people who pass the intelligence test are not worrying about pro bono proctologists from other star systems showing unannounced in their bedrooms. So, we have perfected politeness. We have perfected the ability to listen to damn foolishness without betraying by so much as the flick of an eyebrow that we realize what we're in the presence of. Now I think it's time to refine our mathematical skills, learn to think straight, and not be afraid to denounce the pernicious forms of foolishness which are vitiating the energies of our community and making us appear marginal and absurd in the discourse about truly transforming society.
So, there's something very important about what's going on in the educational system right now, and that's that there's no such thing as objective reality. Hey, that's just your opinion. Everybody is entitled to their opinion about how things are. No one's worth more than anyone else. No one's values are more important than anyone else. No one's abilities are more important than anyone else. Of course, no one's more important than anyone else, but no one's reality is real. It's all completely changeable. It's amorphous. Even mathematics. Even the certainty of mathematics is now being messed around with. Hey, if you think 1 + 1 = 5, well, let's really think about that. Because, you know, you're valued here and your opinion is important to us. So what this does is it creates that uncertainty about what is real. So when I tell you that what I'm telling you right now is the truth, and you can check it out for yourself, well, hey, that's just my opinion.
Point number 2, being awake means knowing that the truth is singular, eternal, and objective, and that truth exists completely independently of our perception of it. And this is something that is completely different than many New Age takes on what it means to be in touch with truth.
Well, the way to resolve this, in my opinion, is to establish some criteria for how information will be filtered that most reasonable people can agree on. And really, it's not a whole lot different than the rules that govern playing football or any other sport. When these criteria are used, confusion is eliminated for many issues, and we've even seen those of us who seem to want to vociferously disagree with us kind of refusing to engage with us and go away. They don't want to have a rules-based discussion, which I think speaks volumes about the type of evidence that they use to support their claims. So I'm going to share with you a few of the things that we use as rules here. And I'm going to propose that we use rules when we're having a discussion, just like you have to have rules for football.
If you've no evidence to back that up, then I'm sorry, all you have is an opinion. And that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion.
That's what I've said, and it's backed by a very significant understanding of the science underpinning it.
That is not science.
Representing Team Plants, today we have Dr. Dean Ornish. He's done pioneering work in heart disease, prostate cancer, epigenetics, research into telomeres with Elizabeth Blackburn, who won the Nobel Prize, and he's currently researching Alzheimer's disease. Dr. Ornish's lifestyle medicine program is covered by Medicare, and his research has been published in numerous prestigious medical journals. Dr. Ornish is such an important figure in medicine, he's received numerous awards. Let's have a quick look at what Dr. Ornish has to say.
We found that even severe heart disease can be reversed. Type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. We did the first randomized trial showing with Dr. Peter Carroll, who's the chair of urology at UCSF, and the late Bill Fair when he was the chair at Sloan Kettering, that even early stage prostate cancer may be slowed, stopped, and even reversed. If it's true for prostate cancer, there's a good chance it'll be true for breast cancer. We can reverse aging and change gene expression. And we're now doing the first randomized trial to see whether these same lifestyle changes may be able to reverse the progression of early stage Alzheimer's disease.
So that's a brief overview of Dr. Dean Ornish, who's representing for a plant-based diet. I would consider him one of the primary leaders in the field of plant-based lifestyle medicine. But now let's turn our attention to one of the leaders in the field of the carnivore diet. Representing for Team Meat, Bart Kay. According to the About page of his YouTube channel, he's a former senior lecturer in clinical physiology, cardiovascular and respiratory, exercise physiology, nutrition research methods and statistics. Apparently he's published a number of peer-reviewed research publications as well as book chapters. He has external consultancies, including the New Zealand All Blacks. Now let's see what Bart Kay has to say after having recently debated with Michelle Lowe, a doctor of psychology and senior lecturer at a prominent UK university.
If I'm in charge, the advice is coming from me. My opinion, based on my very significant understanding of the area. Okay, it's not X, it's my very significant understanding of the area, inside and out. Plus all the anecdotes I've seen,
But based on
I don't give a shit whether you're interested in anecdotes or not, Michelle, frankly.
Based on what?
The inference that it exists is anecdotal. All the anecdotes point in that direction. The anecdotes are being collected in a scientific fashion. We have some anecdotes. They are very, very interesting. We can make some comparisons between the anecdotes on the other side, which are also very, very interesting.
But you've admitted you've got no evidence to support that except anecdote.
We do not have the statistics, we do not have the science, we do not have the inference to say one way or the other with any degree of confidence whatsoever that meat eating is a problem.
But you yourself literally just said that neither side has no evidence. You literally just said that you have no evidence.
The evidence that would be required to support the assertions that are flying around there from both sides is not there. Nobody has any evidence.
Fantastic.
That includes me.
So,
plant foods are not the staple. They are not the basis of the human physiological design. They are a subsistence food that we are able to survive on. It's been a survival technique. It is not the basis of human nutrition. It is a deficient diet. It will cause problems.
And not only that, where is this evidence that you're now speaking of, which you just said that doesn't exist? Where is it? Is it? I'll bet you it's from epidemiology studies. So, huge contradiction there. Oh no, we don't have evidence. No one has evidence, but you have the evidence, though. See, this is Bart K and all of these people. They are legitimate. These are shills. These are industry shills. Not only that, they are relativists. Their job, they get paid. They quit their other jobs in order to take a higher paying job in order to be a mouthpiece for the industries. Either that or they literally just failed out of their careers for how insane they've become. And so their job is to now obfuscate all available evidence. Their job is to confuse you. These people are confusionists. That is how they make their career and make their living, off of your ignorance and your confusion. They're taking advantage of you, is what he is doing, and everyone else like him, Frank Tufano, Sean Baker. These people are telling you that, oh no, all the science that is out there is conclusive. Oh no, that's all. There's nothing we can trust. So you have instead just trust my opinion. So they are literally flipping the hierarchy of evidence on its head. They're literally flipping the highest credible available evidence. They're saying that's not credible, so you have to throw the highest controlled evidence out that we have, which it controls as much for confounding factors, weeds out as much personal bias as humanly possible. That's what the highest level clinical trials and studies are for. That's what the randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled, as well as Mendelian randomization studies. That's what these studies are designed for. They're granulated, especially the highest quality studies like the Seventh-day Adventist 2 health studies and the nurses' health study and the broad study. You know, some of the best studies they specifically control for all of the healthy user bias that Chris Kresser and all these people keep throwing out. They control for healthy user bias. They control for smoking. They control for age, sex, income, gender, on and on. They literally controlled for almost every single confounding factor that Chris Kresser seems to keep throwing out there and blaming it as healthy user bias. Well, where are the studies that you are citing that don't control for health, that control for healthy user bias? You don't have any either. So that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to level the playing field by throwing out all the available evidence, so that way it gives their opinion much more weight than it actually has, which is zero. So they're flipping the hierarchy of evidence on its head.
I'm afraid epidemiology at any level will not do it. It is not acceptable. It will not be read by this court.
The biggest problem with nutritional research, epidemiology, is that it starts with the assumption that there is one diet for everybody. That's something that's rarely discussed, right? But it's this idea that, you know, should everyone be on a low carb diet? Should everyone be on a high carb, you know, low fat or low fat diet? You know, should everyone do this?
This is just not a true claim at all. Epidemiologic research does not start with the assumption that there is one diet for everyone. It just looks at, that's why they have subgroup analysis. That's why there are different groups that are examined in different epidemiological studies. I mean, it's just, this is such a basic point. It's not true. That's why the same effects are analyzed in patients with diabetes, patients without diabetes, in the elderly population, in the non-elderly population. They break it down by race. It's just a vacuous claim, and it's not how epidemiologic data works.
You'd have to ask how he even made such an inference. Like, what is it about epidemiological data that even suggests to him that there's this kind of zeitgeist?
Yeah, it's not. There's different averages, and there's different relative risks, and there's where they're statistically significant or not, and there's different controlled for confounding different factors, and they break it. Oftentimes, they do break it down for different people. So I just don't know where he gets that inference from.
Yeah, it's a strange inference, and I think that we're going to go off the standard hitch raiser here, which is if you assert it without evidence, we are going to dismiss it without evidence.
Literally, they're now saying that systematic reviews and randomized control trials are now the weakest form of evidence. So instead, you should trust opinions and personal anecdotes and random people with no name, no face on Twitter and on Instagram. That's Bart K's advice. And I'm sure he won't agree with that. I'm sure he will just say, no, you have to listen to me instead, because he's the supreme leader of the world. He's the Führer.
Any form of nutritional intervention in humans is not very good in terms of what I would call remotely acceptable scientific inference. Right. Now, if I'm in charge, not only do doctors shut up about nutrition for now and forever, so do nutritionists, by which I mean registered dietitians. In fact, that organisation gets shut down. Everyone that's an RD gets put out of business because they are also mandated to give the wrong advice. While we're at it, we shut down the Heart Foundation, the Diabetics Association, and all of those ones as well. They all get shut down because they are all guilty of genocide.
Okay, so this right here is literally the epitome of the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is because these people are claiming that literally the preponderance of evidence, the best quality, the longest, running, the largest population studies, the highest available evidence data that we have is, and as well as the people who have been engaged and involved in the peer review process of, vetting this information and, evaluating it under more and more rigorous scrutiny. They're saying that the peer review process is not important, and instead the most important is personal N=1 anecdote that somehow makes it more credible than, being able to subject it through the peer review process, which is basically exposing it to, opening it up to scrutiny of other people. And, so the equivalent of this would be for the individual, the N=1, your personal story, your personal experience, is when you put that out, in the public space, such as on Facebook, in Facebook groups, on your YouTube channel, you're on your social media, you're putting it out in the public, and so essentially you are opening yourself up to the same peer review process. You're opening yourself up to criticism.
Opening yourself up to scrutiny and to peer review, what it does is it allows the truth to be tested. It withstands the test of scrutiny, and the things that withstand is the truth. And that's literally, this comes from the ancient wisdom of knowing what the truth was, which they essentially likened the truth to a tree, which literally is etymologically linked. It shares etymological origins, the same root word of drew, which drew is the root word of druid, and it comes all the way from Proto-Indo-European root, which I believe was druva, the same root word of the Vedas in Hinduism, which I forget it off the top of my head. But
It's the root word of the truth, because the truth is the root. It is the foundation. They consider that the truth, it was literally in etymological origins, it was meaning steadfast, that which holds strong, firm, solid foundation. So we are talking about, in the biblical reference, your house built upon a foundation of stone, which will stand the test of time, which goes back to the ancient builders, the ancient advanced high civilization of advanced mathematics and also advanced human physiology, where they built the pyramids. They built megalithic foundational stone structures encoded with the truth, which would withstand the test of time and have withstood countless world global cataclysms, such as massive earthquakes, such as massive comet impacts, such as massive floods, and all of these seismic events and seismic activity. These structures are built on a foundation of truth, on a foundation of stone, as opposed to your house of cards being built upon the sand, where the big bad wolf, anybody can come along and huff and puff, and your whole structure, your whole foundation of reality gets blown asunder, because it was built on a pile of BS. Which is the very meaning of why the hierarchy of evidence is a pyramidal structure. It is built upon a foundation of solidity. And as you progress higher and higher, it's like running through the gauntlet. What emerges out the other side is the most distilled, purest form of truth that we can possibly come to. And so that's the closest to the universal truth, the underlying foundational truth of reality that we can get to. And, who knows? I don't think we can ever be perfect, but it is the process of scrutiny and of filtration of the information that allows us to get the closest that we possibly can. That's why these studies are the highest quality. And that is why opening yourself up to criticism and to scrutiny only makes you harder. It strengthens you. It makes you stronger. It makes you more firm and solid in your foundation of truth. Just as the ancient druids and the ancient wisdom of the tree, of the wise dome, of the wisdom of the wise tree, of the wizard, the knowledge of the foundational truth of the underlying structure of reality, where the tree stands fast, it stands firm, it stands strong, and it stands solid, as the root is the truth, the foundation, the source, the origin.
And it's the epitome of the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is, for those, if anybody doesn't know, it's the phenomenon in psychology where, people who with the least amount of experience or skills or competence in any particular thing, they tend to have the highest level of confidence. There's this confidence interval that's basically very high correlating with the level of ignorance or the level of naivete, nescience, if you will, just essentially not knowing, better. So you're, you're a beginner and you have the most confidence at that level. But as you start to get more and more versed in it, you realize, oh wow, maybe I bit off more than I could chew. You start to have a little bit of more doubt creeps in, and you start to realize just how little you actually do know. Like once you start getting immersed in it, that's when you start to, so your confidence goes down dramatically. But as you regain expertise and mastery in that field, your confidence goes back up again. And so there's this reverse, it's an inverse bell curve is what it is. And so the epitome of that is literally where the individual thinks that somehow you have all this, you have found the secret. And the majority is actually wrong. And don't get me I actually have found how ironic. I actually have found quite a few, things that nobody else has found. But I would never, be so arrogant to think that everybody else is wrong. The entire peer review process itself is worthless, and instead, personal anecdote is all that matters. It would be so it's the epitome of Dunning-Kruger effect. It's incompetence to think that, Bart K or, any one of these carnivore leaders, Phil something.
I might have a slightly different view on it from the guys who are debunking the actual science of it. For me, it's a kind of an n=1 perspective that I'd like to put out here, but it was just afflicted with so much scientism, this awful modern disease and religion of scientism where everything has to come down to science. Even if it's wrong, it has to be a study. Where are the studies? Where are the studies? When I say that, I'm developing some kind of a phobia, I think, of where are the studies? Where are the studies? I heard it so many times. I had so many run-ins with vegans. So many. It's always the same. It's always the studies, the studies.
At that point, we should introduce the concept of the evidence hierarchy, because a consistent problem engaged in by both sides throughout this debate is a lack of respect for the evidence hierarchy. So if someone's cracking out higher level research, you can't be cracking out a petri dish study. If someone's got higher level research, you can't be talking about mouse data. So Avi, why don't you talk about the evidence hierarchy from a medical perspective?
Yeah, so you can think of it as a pyramid. The bottom are the least meaningful, least impactful studies. They're there to just generate ideas. That's really all they're there for. These are things like editorials, opinions. A little bit higher than that are mechanistic data, so things like from petri dish studies, test tube studies, and slightly above that would be animal studies, mouse data, rat data. Above that would be individual case reports. Above that would be case series. A case report is just looking at one patient and something that happened. Case series is looking at multiple patients. Then there's something called a case control study, which just usually looks at a group of patients in one block of time and try to look at associations. Then there's retrospective data, which looks at certain outcomes and then looks back in time to see if there was any exposure to try to link up. Then higher than that, there's prospective cohort studies, where they take a group of patients and then they follow them into the future and look at outcomes that happen based on the different characteristics or exposures that they had in the first place. And then higher than that are randomized controlled trials, where ideally double-blinded randomized controlled trials, where they take different groups of patients and they randomize them into two different study groups. There's a controlled environment, and then they find an outcome. And then higher than that are systematic reviews and meta-analysis, where they compile multiple either cohort studies or randomized controlled trials, and they take the risk ratios or the outcomes and they compile them together, and it increases the power to detect different differences. And there's certain criteria in these trials, in these meta-analyses, that are preset to determine what should qualify and what should not qualify. Now, let me say one thing about the evidence hierarchy, because this is a point that gets missed a lot. Here is not what the evidence hierarchy means. The evidence hierarchy doesn't mean that a meta-analysis is always going to be superior to a randomized controlled trial, and a randomized controlled trial is always going to be superior to a prospective cohort study. That's not what the evidence hierarchy says. What the evidence hierarchy says is that all things held equal, the meta-analysis will be superior to the randomized controlled trial, which will be superior to the prospective cohort study. So what that means, for example, if you have a disease with a long lag time, so let's say it takes 20 years for a heart attack to happen. If you have a prospective study that lasted 20 years, and if you have a randomized controlled trial that lasted 1 year, the prospective cohort study actually would be more relevant to answer your question than the randomized controlled trial. But if the randomized controlled trial was 20 years and the prospective cohort study was also 20 years and everything else was held equal, then the randomized controlled trial takes precedence over the prospective cohort study. So in some context, epidemiological data can, despite its limitations, can actually be a more appropriate study to answer certain questions than a randomized controlled trial can, simply because all else is not held equal. But all else held equal, the evidence hierarchy would hold. It would suggest that randomized controlled trial is more important, it takes more weight than a prospective cohort study. Same thing for meta-analysis and systematic reviews for the randomized controlled trial.
Also, sorry to be coughing, I'm just getting over a cold. And then of course there's meta-analyses, but that is just really a type of meta-analysis, so it's still in the same tier. It's just, if you have a single meta-analysis and then you have a meta-meta that includes that meta, well, you'd assume that'll be higher. And obviously what you've said there is totally clear. If there's a clear hierarchy of what kind of evidence we care about, and the only time you can argue that a lower form of evidence takes precedent over a higher form of evidence is if there's some specific thing that's not consistent between the two of them that is relevant to the conclusion you're trying to draw in a really particular way. And the reason that the evidence hierarchy is so important with respect to this particular debate is that there are just countless moments throughout this, maybe we can remember to try to point them out, where data could just be flat out dismissed based on its position in the evidence hierarchy relative to the data that was just presented from the other side. So if you have the evidence hierarchy at the top of your mind, it's basically a funnel by which a large portion of the claims made can just flat out be denied.
So you can be the judge of whether or not this type of information you might find from seemingly credible sources within the social media sphere dedicated to low carb and keto constitutes a threat to public health. Upon Kevin Bass suggesting that this type of information could be a public health threat, he was immediately derided as openly advocating Orwellian censorship and being anti-science by most of the low-carb blogosphere, including someone who has banned me from his channel and openly rejected the scientific hierarchy of evidence.
I just demand evidence. Like, if you're going to make a claim...
and your hierarchy of evidence that you claim is dogma is untrue.
Just let that sink in for a second, y'all. Suggesting that misinformation and dangerous health advice is a possible nuisance to public health is declared as anti-scientific social media censorship by people who reject the scientific hierarchy of evidence. Yep, that scratches the surface of how deep this rabbit hole goes.
Now, but, you know, the thing is, all of this mire, this morass of studies, this is the thing I'd like to say about it. What about the carnivores? Nothing's going wrong with them. This is the big elephant in the room. If everything is so bad about meat and fat, why are people reversing everything on meat and fat that meat and fat's supposed to cause? Nobody's getting sick. I'm not interested in which diet is the ultimate human diet. I'm really not. I don't think there is one. And not eating the plants that are in the shops that don't exist in the wild. Cauliflower, broccoli, all that crap, kale, ugh. All of that sort of crap, which there's a lot of problems with. They didn't even exist before we got these illnesses. And all the sweet fruit and stuff like that. This is the stuff we're supposed to be eating for fiber to stay regular, which carnivores are fine with. They are not constipated. Look, in carnivory, you get the odd little, teething problem as you're adapting. But after that, people are fine. They're great. Good as gold.
And so this is insanity. Okay, so anecdote is the only language that they will speak to you with. So but the problem is their anecdotes are nothing but cherry picking. Okay, this is the epitome of cherry picking because they're only trying to tell you that everything's great. Everyone healed everything miraculously, and there is zero evidence for any claims made. There is no actual hard data from any of these anecdotes. They're not showing any of their blood tests, their blood lipids, their biomarkers. They're not showing their micronutrient panels. They're not showing their gut biosis health tests either. They're not showing organic acids tests and fecal stool sample tests for bacterial colonies and parasites and pathogens. No evidence, no data points, no evidence whatsoever for any of their claims. But when you actually look at some of their anecdotes, so when we look at just a few of the anecdotes, and I will show you an anecdote of my own friend.
For example, here's this anecdote from my personal friend who I've known for several years, who messaged me telling me that she was paleo for 5 years after being vegan for 6 months, and she just got out of the hospital from an ER visit diagnosed with ischemia, so ischemia is actually when your blood flow to a specific part of your body, such as the brain or the heart, the blood flow is basically completely blocked to where your organs are not receiving any oxygen or any blood flow due to the blockage. So in other words, it's atherosclerotic blockage of the arteries. From 5 years on a high meat, low carb, paleo style diet. And yes, I know it's not actually a carnivore diet, but we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about a low carb diet. Seriously, get real. I've just shown you here this study that shows the causal link between saturated fat and cardiovascular disease and atherosclerosis. Lowering your cholesterol, it translates to lower incidence of heart attack, of cardiovascular events. So this is not up for debate. And again, see, I can pull stories to support anything, but of course, this is what's going to happen. If you trust anecdotes, then here's what the anecdotes will actually start to show you, is when people stop cherry picking what they only want you to hear, and you hear actually both sides of the story. There are countless of these, but although most people, they drop dead of heart disease, because that's the first warning sign of heart disease, is you drop dead. And the people who have dropped dead from heart attacks, they're not around to tell you their personal anecdotes of how they died from their carnivore diet. So that's why you're not hearing any of these stories of people dropping dead, unless somebody they know who cares enough to come out and say, hey, this person I know died from their carnivore diet. But here's one of my personal friends telling you that she had a heart attack from her paleo diet, and now she wants to go vegan again after they were all making fun of me.
I mean, there's very little research out there on the carnivore diet. I mean, in all honesty, the only research on the carnivore diet that's been done has been very positive. I mean, if we look at the totality of the research, and it's, the 6 peer-reviewed studies that came out in 1928 with Stefansson and Anderson when they did it for a year, and they found no deficiencies whatsoever. They were completely healthy. So we don't have a lot of research on that.
You have to have fat with a lean. Lean and fat together make a perfect diet. A balanced diet.
A balanced diet.
Balanced diet. You have everything you need if you have both lean and fat.
You fuck around, have a seizure or heart attack, you better back the fuck up before you get smacked the fuck up. This is how we do it on our side.
First of all, I don't care what diet you eat. Nope. The revisionist history stops here. Yup. Hit that subscribe button and let's get started. I guess Sean Baker gets his information from Wikipedia, where the entry on Viljamur Stefansson must have been written by a fanboy, but you're about to see the real story right now. Back in the 1920s, Viljamur Stefansson and Karsten Andersen decided to eat a 100% all-meat carnivore diet for a year in the name of science, and the results were terrible, huh? Terrible in what ways? This is the claim.
In all honesty, the only research on the carnivore diet that's been done has been very positive.
And this is the reality. Come on, man, get a job. This is the actual data. The solid lines represent these two men and their severely crippled carbohydrate metabolism while eating a carnivore diet after 1 year. They had terrible blood sugar control after 1 year on a carnivore diet. Karsten Andersen had prolonged hyperglycemia. After eating a mixed diet for a few weeks, which obviously increased their carbohydrate intake, they both performed much better on the oral glucose tolerance test represented by the dotted lines. Upon the first glucose tolerance test being administered, Karsten Anderson was found to have glycosuria, or the presence of sugar in his urine, which by itself is a symptom of uncontrolled diabetes.
Hey, it's Mike here, and today I wanted to do a short follow-up video on Shawn Baker, that guy who's doing an all-meat diet. He went on Joe Rogan, and I did a whole video about that, a longer one, and you can see all of his claims and how high the carbon footprint of his diet is and various things like that. But today I just want to look at his blood results because he's made some of them available. Now for one that actually surprised me, and that is his blood sugar levels. He had very high blood sugar levels.
Glucose, your fasting glucose was at 127, which is definitely, it can be on the higher side. Some people in the low-carb community can see some dawn phenomena,
which put him in the diabetic blood sugar range for fasting blood glucose. Now keep in mind, he's not eating any plants at all, so he's not getting any of those plant carbohydrates, yet his blood sugar is still high, and I love how low-carb and keto people are always like, oh, you're not going to eat any carbs, so your blood sugar is going to be super low, and then that's going to make it so you can't even feed cancer. Oh wait, he actually has diabetic levels. Does that mean that he has diabetes? Well, it's not quite as clear-cut from the Mayo Clinic. In terms of fasting glucose, quote, if it's 126 milligrams per deciliter or higher on 2 separate tests, you have diabetes. You have the weakest pancreas. Goodbye. So by this standard, if he went and got another test and it was the same, he would clinically have diabetes, it seems. Now let's look to hemoglobin A1C, another measure for diabetes diagnosis. And this is simply how much sugar is attached to the hemoglobin, the blood cells, and it's a measure of how high your blood sugar has been over the past few months. So a more long-term stable measurement. His hemoglobin A1C was 6.3, or on the high end of pre-diabetic, very close to the 6.5 or greater for full-on diabetes. And again, with the denial, it's pretty amazing. He says that magically his red blood cells could be living longer, and therefore the hemoglobin A1C is being overestimated. What?
We know that some people, particularly diabetics, their red blood cells can live even shorter, so they often will underestimate what their true A1C is, and the opposite may be occurring in this situation, where if red blood cells live longer, then it overestimates the hemoglobin A1C.
No, what you're worried about with hemoglobin A1C is if your blood sugar has been consistently high in the past, and his blood sugar is high right now, so we have every reason to believe that no, it actually just is from high blood sugar. You're totally full of it. This guy's ability to deny things is amazing. I bet if his leg fell off from diabetes or something like that, he'd be like, oh, I'm just transforming into a super lizard man. Don't worry, it'll grow back. We'll look at the specific numbers in a second, but just so you know, he got this after 15 months on a carnivore diet, an all-meat diet, and he is talking to Rob Wolf, a paleo author, in all of the audio that you will hear.
He's redirected much of the ire of the vegan jihadis somewhere other than against me, because, man, they do not like the guy.
We can see that his LDL was a whopping 150 milligrams per deciliter. And that's really over twice what it should be. If you're looking to Lauren Cordain, who is one of the founders of the paleo diet, he had a paper saying that the ideal was between 50 and 70. From the study's graph at about 150, you can see that he is on the worst end of this chart in terms of atherosclerosis. And of course, 50 is way down there at the best end. Nope. You can't just say these people are healthy because they do CrossFit. Their diet is putting them at a high risk of heart disease. Just look at Bob Harper, the host of Biggest Loser. According to this article, quote, he's a fan of CrossFit-style workouts and eating clean. They then do a big appeal to futility of, oh, it was just genetics. Everybody can get a heart attack. Just keep eating the way you're eating. But what did Bob Harper have to say about this clean eating, which was essentially a paleo diet, which is, again, what Rob Wolf promotes? Quote, the dieting world went back in time to find variations of the caveman diet, but I found those high-protein plans had too much fat and weren't so great for my heart. So he's actually pointing to the paleo diet as the cause of his heart attack. And in terms of Shawn Baker, I'd be very surprised if he did not have issues with kidney stones from all that excess protein. From the Cleveland Clinic, moving from blood to urine for a second, quote, eating large amounts of animal proteins can cause uric acid to build up in the urine. The uric acid can settle and form a stone by itself or in a combination with calcium.
Well, she's mentioned her mother in the past about how she's doing so great on the
carnivore diet, she's made Instagram posts showing off her mother's body in a bikini because apparently that's the gold standard for scientific evidence for proving a diet's good. Well, why didn't she mention her mother in this lion diet video? Well, guess what? Her mother's dying of kidney cancer.
Mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer, collecting duct, at the end of April. It was unbearable. I didn't sleep for 2 days when we found out. Mom and Dad walked around in a stupor. I've never experienced anything like that amount of stress before. I didn't get my period this summer until we found out Mom's going to be okay. Thank goodness. So after that terminal diagnosis, she had a total kidney removal. And then there was a surgical complication, a 1 in 20,000 surgical complication.
What's also interesting is that red meat consumption is associated with an increased risk of kidney cancer. Now, did Michaela Peterson's mother develop kidney cancer because of her carnivore diet or high meat consumption over a long period of time? I don't know. Maybe her kidney cancer was caused by her diet, or maybe it had nothing to do with her diet or lifestyle, and it was just an unfortunate case of bad luck. But what I do know is Michaela Peterson is very quick to associate any positive things with her carnivore diet. She's even willing to go out of her way to lie to support the efficacy of her diet. She lied about curing her issues with anxiety and being off of medication. She also lied about curing her father's mood disorder with this carnivore diet when he was never cured. He still had ongoing issues with anxiety. He was on medication to treat this anxiety, and now that he's off the medication, he's in rehab. So Michaela's claiming that she has helped thousands of people by helping them switch to the carnivore diet or this lion diet. I find that claim to be rather dubious because she only has 37 Patreon supporters. She doesn't have a very large audience, and the people that we do know she has influenced, her mother and her father. Take a look at them. Jordan Peterson still suffers from a horrible mood disorder. He's in rehab right now. He's at a low point in his life. And her mother suffered from kidney cancer, had a kidney removed, nearly died. So these are the two people that we know she has influenced, and they are in terrible health. So take that for what you will, but I am definitely not going to recommend Michaela Peterson's carnivore diet.
Enough about that. Let's move on to testosterone, which was super duper low.
Total testosterone was 237. The free testosterone was 5.5. Am I reading that correct?
Yeah, they were low. They were low. I repeated that actually again, and they were a little bit higher, but still low. And this is an interesting thing, and I think we see this across the low carb community.
He had a total testosterone of 237, which is literally off the charts low. His free testosterone was also really low, and I find it funny how Rob Wolf was like, "Oh, but you have muscle though."
You clearly carry a lot of muscle mass, have some very impressive physical performance.
No, he's been an athlete for a long time. This is residual muscle. There's no evidence that he's built any new muscle on this diet. And how could he with the testosterone levels of a 90-year-old grandma? Well, he claims to how his testosterone just goes further because his body is so magical.
That you become sensitized to, your receptors become extremely sensitive. I would argue that perhaps that is a good thing if these organs are not being required to continuously pump out hormones, maybe running at a lower background level, but having the same clinical effect might even be a more efficient way to do things.
He's deeply in denial. Now tell me, Mr. Baker, if you saw a vegan with these testosterone levels, what would you think? Well, it just so happens that, according to this study, vegans have higher levels of total testosterone on average than people who eat meat. Here are his testosterone levels, and here are the average vegan ones. Obviously, he's older than average, but still.
This is for the people that actually have brains. If you eat sentient animals, you will have sentience. Those that don't eat sentient animals lack sentience. That's a pretty good heuristic to realize.
What?
This dude was a wreck. A few hours after the first glucose tolerance test, Karsten Anderson developed pneumonia. Now, before you say, oh, it's just a little pneumonia, remember this research was from the late 1920s. For reference, Alexander Fleming had just discovered penicillin. Pneumonia was the number 3 cause of death behind cancer and heart disease. Pneumonia was no joke in 1929. On top of that, we now know high blood sugar, or hyperglycemia, actually increases the risk of death from pneumonia. Keep watching, because I'm not even done yet. Come on, man. Dr. Baker, how are you going to sit there and say this research was positive and they were both in good health?
In all honesty, the only research on the carnivore diet that's been done has been very positive.
Nah.
The 6 peer-reviewed studies that came out in 1928 with Stefansson and Anderson when they did it for a year, and they found no deficiencies whatsoever. They were completely healthy.
I guess if you're cool with diabetes like blood sugar control and almost dying, then you could say the research was positive. Hey, at least they weren't deficient in anything. Just because they didn't die of scurvy doesn't mean they were in great health. In fact, one thing they weren't deficient in was cholesterol. That's right, Vilhjalmur Stefansson's cholesterol was over 300 at several points throughout the year while on the carnivore diet. Don't even get me started on Karsten Anderson again. This dude's blood cholesterol bounced around from 600 to 500 to 400 and at one point all the way up to 800 after a 20-hour fast, and then went down to 200 after he stopped the carnivore diet. This is the actual research that was published on the carnivore diet. So what happened to Vilhjalmur Stefansson? Vilhjalmur Stefansson died of a stroke at age 82. A stroke is a form of vascular disease. Look, he is certainly an interesting character, and there is more information out there if you want to learn about his life. Let me know if you can find it, but I was unable to find a cause of death for Karsten Anderson because it appears he has only been preserved in history as a footnote to the comparatively well-publicized Vilhjalmur Stefansson, who has become somewhat of a low-carb / zero-carb / carnivore legend. Like many legends and anecdotes, the real story is much less whimsical and certainly not something I would base my diet on. I don't know about you, but I have more ambitious goals than not dying of scurvy and hoping I survive some reckless N=1 hypercholesterolemic self-experimentation based on a false sense of confidence.
Studies are important. We need to do those. But what inspires people often is just an anecdote.
The rise of anecdotal dieting is facilitated by social media health influencers like Sean Baker. Anecdotal diet trends minimize or eliminate your ability to conduct a process of verification. Real men are not easily fooled. Now you tell me who whitewashed the limited medical history that exists for the carnivore diet and who came with straight facts that you can verify. If you think I got something wrong, then say something in the comments. What I'm going to do is set up a playlist with the other videos I've created about the carnivore diet. This includes the sore throat, hoarse voice analysis.
These are right. Frozen fry. Frozen fry. These are right. These are right. Frozen.
And perhaps most importantly, the Dr. Ken Berry cholesterol confusion video. You'll want to watch that video next. Subscribe and click to watch the playlist at the end of this video. Y'all know what time it is. Red Pill Vegan. Next.
I need help. I don't feel good anymore. I've been carnivore about 2 months at least, and my energy is lacking, and I kind of don't want to see another piece of food at all. And this is a very common reported anecdotal experience. In fact, there's a really good article that Vegan Foot Soldier shared about it in one of his videos. I might look that up later and do something on that. My heart races sometimes. Again, this heart palpitations. That is a sign of irregular heartbeat. That is a sign of potential onsetting heart attack, and which is the world's leading cause of death. I eat 2 meals per day, eggs, bacon, and a bit of cheese in the morning, sometimes beef as well, a cup of coffee, usually with a splash of... Oh, must be the almond milk that's causing her heart palpitations, though. Let's read some of the others. They're having to add salt. They're having to add electrolytes, which is the mineral salts which are obtained from the soil and uptaken by the plants and then converted from inorganic salts into organic salts, which can be utilized by the body by conversion process from plants. And they're trying to get their electrolytes from adding salt because they're having severe muscle cramps during the night when they're sleeping in their legs, and it's insane. And then, hey guys, the fart breath appears to be coming back since I started fasting a week ago. How can I stop the shit mouth? Could it be me feasting too hard and cramming a lot in a little time? The fart breath, the shit mouth and shit pants. There's actually a thing called disaster pants and keto crotch and diarrhea face, such as carb cravings, extreme bodily odors, including fart breath. Keto crotch and bowel movement smells that will clear out. Oh god, diarrhea, which again, this is disaster pants, and then the constipation for a week or longer. They say this is normal.
If you have a sandwich or something right now, you might just want to go ahead and put that down. Mm-hmm. Okay. So okay. So I went on Reddit, and the very first thing when you type in disaster pants keto, this is one of the first links that comes up, and the thread title here, and this is on the R Keto community with 1.2 million subscribers. So a couple people read this. The thread title is disaster pants.
Oh, really?
Are you ready to hear the comment that this person left?
I'm assuming that this could get graphic, so I will ask. Try to keep it PG.
Yeah. Okay. We're gonna go with G even. Ooh. So, expletive, period. Today I wasn't very hungry, so I've literally had coffee with MCT oil, a salad with chicken and egg and walnuts and blue cheese, and a large herbal tea with MCT oil. My colorful word for poo is water. Please advise. Too much MCT oil? Lots of question marks. My stomach feels like it's churning itself.
Oh dear.
Oh yeah.
All right, so for people who aren't familiar, MCT oil is
medium chain triglyceride oil, and we will get into that. But before we do, I just want to note that one of the first responses here was maybe too much salad.
That was a user response?
That was a user response, and my answer, no. As someone who eats 3 large salads a day, even if you don't eat salad and you go to eat a salad, it's not going to have the kind of impact that this person experienced on their gastrointestinal health. Wow. So, but MCT oil, or that medium chain triglyceride oil, is a keto diet sort of staple for a lot of people. And if you go into a slightly more reliable source, the PubMed database, and you put in diarrhea, medium chain triglycerides, you will get quite a few results. And indeed, a lot of studies have found that MCT oil can cause not just diarrhea, but also, get ready, abdominal discomfort, cramping, gassiness, and bloating.
Wow, that just sounds like the disclaimers at the end of a medication commercial.
Is a similar effect in that it causes, again, put your sandwich down, steatorrhea, which is, any guesses on what that might be?
Steatorrhea? Uh-huh. It's like stay out of here with that rhea?
Yeah, well, really it is. So it's fatty, because that root word is steatorrhea, so fatty diarrhea.
Ooh.
I'm saying that quiet because nobody really needs to hear that. Ooh. I know. Yeah.
That sandwich is going to stay
down. It's going to cut your appetite this episode.
Y'all know that girl, Elise Parker. She allegedly did the carnivore diet, then basically got called out for faking it and violating the FTC guidelines for influencers. Well, it turns out she may not have faked it after all. And some personal details about her experience appear to have surfaced. Allegedly, she posted on her Instagram story how she pooped in her pants on the carnivore diet, not once, but twice. This looks legit. If it's fake news, I will take this video down. But regardless, this is in line with the entire compilation of explosive diarrhea experiences I just put together in a hilarious video you can see by clicking on the thumbnail that pops up at the end of this video. I'll also put a link to the original source video for this, and I want y'all to tell me in the comment section whether or not you think it's fake news. Alright, y'all know what time it is. Red Pill Vegan, next.
Ridiculous diet, and I'm talking about explosive diet. And that's just gonna be all over the damn place. Oh my god. Shit everywhere. There's shit everywhere!
I've had rocketing diarrhea. From meat? That's from all meat, yeah.
Damn it! There's shit on the windows! Oh my god! My house is full of shit! He shit everywhere! Look what he did! He shit all over the wall!
I've had rocketing diarrhea. From meat? That's from all meat, yeah.
When can you do it? How about tonight at 8? Great, thanks. Thank you, boys. I gotta go upstairs. I gotta go upstairs to come and leave. See you at 8.
You think you might have appendicitis?
Well, my stomach's rumbling and I'm having these shooting pains.
Okay, maybe I should take you to the hospital.
No, I'll be all right. It makes me all queasy and...
You might notice diarrhea. That's like a common thing in both the keto and carnivore communities to warn people to never trust a...
Oh, wow. Yeah, you know what? I think I feel a little better.
When you're starting keto or carnivore.
That actually stain the toilet bowl like if it was turmeric.
0 gas, 0 bloating. I fuck twice a day. At a time of my own choosing, by the way.
I don't know about you, but I seriously don't on the carnivore diet. I don't feel like I've really farted. I don't think I did on keto or GAPS either.
I'll tell you one thing, I do not trust my butthole at all. When I feel coming on, I'm like, oh, this could be a disaster.
The thread title is Disaster Pants.
Oh, really?
In my belly. It's like it's gross. And I've had food poisoning 3 times already. In 5 weeks. Like, this is a nightmare diet for anybody. Food poisoning as a vegan in the 10 years was like 0. I don't remember ever having it.
Raw bone marrow. So for those of you who don't know, Sverige, another raw carnivore dieter, he almost died from eating raw bone marrow. He got an infection called Campylobacteria. It nearly killed him. That bacteria, it attacks your nervous system, and it can actually make your heart shut down. And Sverige made a video about it on his channel.
What I tried is eating the beef leg and the bone marrow inside of the bone. For whatever reason, I got this bacteria called Campylobacteria enteritis something. I'll write it in the description. And what I actually got was one of the rarest cases, where more rare than others. People usually don't get this. Is that my muscles stopped working, and it took me a month now to actually get fully recovered from it. I actually talked to a trainer, and she said that many people got completely paralyzed from it, and some people even die from it because it goes in the heart, and the heart is a muscle and makes the heart stop beating. So those are really bad cases.
So here's Frank encouraging people to eat raw meat, including raw bone marrow, when other carnivore YouTubers have tried this and they nearly died from it. It's serious. Like, obviously, sooner or later, if you're gonna eat raw meat all the time, you're going to get an infection like this. So, like, Frank, you know, keep doing that, at least if you die.
The other one was digestive issues, and so what I tend to see is people who begin their adaptation phase might experience gas, bloating, diarrhea, like loose stools, brain fog, like just nausea in general. And this could be quite a few different things. Maybe their ratios of fat to protein are off. Maybe they're consuming way too much fat, not enough protein, or vice versa. So it helps to play with the levels. I like to be around 25% protein, 75% fat. The main source of my calories are coming from, I'd say, like beef fat, organ meats, and then I eat maybe like a half pound of beef a day. Your gut microbiome is like shifting majorly because all these bacteria in your digestive tract within hopefully they're not really so much in the small intestine, but mostly in the colon, they're going to be dying off and they're going to be leaving your body because they no longer have a source of food, which is coming from the fiber. And so as these bacteria leave your body and they die off and starve to death, there's going to be some uncomfortable sensations. There might be some signals to eat carbohydrates as these things die off. So
if there's nothing happening, and you could say all your good bacteria are dead, you have a lifeless sack of crabs down there, and that's why you have no gas, maybe, but it sure feels nice.
People can have some pretty intense reactions. I know I definitely had some like stomach cramping, some diarrhea, some uncomfortability for like the first couple weeks. And I watched one of my best friends go through a much more challenging adaptation phase. But now he's doing extremely well. But the first 30 days were just really intense. So it's really common. I wouldn't be too scared if you got some cramps and some digestion issues. There's just like major changes going on.
And a lot of that's because your body just hasn't built up a system to be digesting all that fat. And so you need both the stomach acid part and the bile from the liver part. A lot of people are able to use ox bile, and I think I'll link to it down below. There's a stomach acid supplement, and I know a lot of you guys have had experience with that I usually don't recommend a ton of supplements, but that's kind of something you can use as a crutch as you're getting your body used to eating this biologically appropriate diet that you're going to feel good on. Pooping problems. Stinky poops. This can be the gut flora thing that we just talked about, or your poop can stink. And it's just like your body, like I said, it has an awesome detoxification system. So if it makes too much of something, it gets rid of it. And so if your poop, like you just started keto or you just started carnivore and your poop's super stinky, it could be just ketones. Not a big deal. It'll go away.
All right, guys, so the truth about what's actually happening here, which apparently none of these low carbers actually understand anything about what really happens inside the gut, especially with the microbiome. I mean, they'll talk about it and they'll pay it lip service and they'll appeal to it, but yet they don't, if they actually understand anything about the microbiome, they'll understand how it works, which it cannot possibly work on the carnivore diet, because what happens is all of your good, your healthy gut bacteria, the bacteria strains that actually the Bacteroides, you have two major enterotypes, which is either Bacteroides dominant or Prevotella dominant. And the Bacteroides dominant is basically a gut microbiome that is adjusted to high animal food products, as opposed to a Prevotella dominant, which is conducive to high fiber, high plant food intake, a plant-based diet. So these are two separate microbiomes. One is associated, the Bacteroides dominant is associated with higher rates of aggression, of violence, and as well as mood disorders, neurobehavioral disorders such as Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, chronic anxiety, chronic depression. And the reason for this, the actual mechanism for this, lies in the microbiome itself. Because these gut bacteria, the Prevotella dominant bacteria, they feed on the resistant starch, or all of that evil fiber that we can't digest, which is actually what makes it so healthy, which is why the more fiber that actually is not broken down and digested is more food for the healthy gut bacteria. And they move in and they start eating this fiber, and they ferment it, and that fermentation process produces short chain fatty acids and medium chain fatty acids such as butyrate, propionate, as well as neuropeptides, neurotransmitters such as serotonin, dopamine. And so the production of these peptides and these neurotransmitters are known in outcomes in large-scale studies correlated with better health outcomes of lower risk and even preventing and even curing chronic depression, anxiety, neuropsychiatric and neurobehavioral disorders such as, again, chronic anxiety, chronic depression, mood swings, anger, violence, and all of these things, which is
has been also shown in the prison study, where they placed cohorts of the prison population onto either a whole vegan diet or chose to keep their diet the same, and the recidivism rate dramatically decreased by 98%, which means the recurrence of violent or the recurrence of crime. But so these neurotransmitters also produce lower rates and even cures symptoms of autism, ADHD, anxiety, and again, these neurobehavior and neuropsychiatric disorders, as well as Parkinson's.
A California official was quoted as saying, "There is a noticeable difference in the personalities of the vegetarian inmates. They smile more, are fully racially integrated, attend religious classes and anger management classes eagerly." Within 10 days, the vegan inmates expressed improvement in how they feel. One prisoner named Eric was so impacted by the program, he said it changed his life forever. "From the day I left the facility, I have never used drugs again or taken another drink. I no longer have to push a cart around on the streets. They broke a chain for me with diet and spiritual intervention. I owe it all to them." In fact, he is happily married and is working as a licensed drug and alcohol counselor. You can read about Eric's experience here. Whilst researching the prison program, I stumbled across a quote from a senior sociology lecturer called Dr. Taylor from Flinders University. She had found that meat workers' aggression levels were so high they're similar to the scores for incarcerated populations. This then led me to a study from the universities of Windsor and Michigan State, which found that in locations surrounding slaughterhouses, there are clusters of domestic violence incidences and violent crimes such as rape and sex offences amongst the workers and their communities that seem to occur because of the nature of the work in the slaughterhouse. The findings indicated that slaughterhouse employment increased total arrest rates, arrests for violent crimes, arrests for rape, and arrests for other sex offences in comparison with other industries. Another study conducted in Australia also found the same thing. I'm not trying to offend anyone here. We must be respectful of people's decisions on what they choose to eat. These studies don't apply to most people, as those who eat meat don't kill the animals themselves. However, it's been said that by eating animal products, we desensitize ourselves consciously or subconsciously from the suffering and cruelty of the meat, dairy, and egg industries.
So I want you guys to check out this image even closer. I want you to see if you notice anything about these bodies, about these corpses. Do you notice anything that might remind you of somebody? Just something to consider with what might be going on with the process here. Might make you rethink, exactly what we're doing here.
We have to desensitize ourselves from the fact that this piece of meat used to be a living being. This desensitization is more indirect and much less intense than the slaughterhouse workers, but I guess at low levels it is still there. Putting aside the physical effects animal products may have on our bodies, what impact, if any, does that desensitization have on our mental, spiritual, and emotional well-being?
And the mechanism, again, by which this happens is specifically the short chain or medium, I forget if it's short chain or medium chain, but the production of butyrate by the good bacteria, these healthy bacteria, which are completely wiped out as soon as you stop feeding them fiber. Even for going on just a day-long fast, these bacteria begin to start getting wiped out because they depend on that high fiber, on that resistant starch. They depend on what we've been eating for over 20 million years of human evolution, however you want to consider that, from high starch foods, roots, tubers, we've been subsisting on the starch, which is the primary fuel for the brain, that long-burning, clean-burning glucose. But so what happens, as soon as you stop feeding that bacteria, and as soon as those bacteria stop producing that butyrate from the fiber intake, it sends out a signal to the rest of the gut bacteria that it is under attack from foreign invaders. And whether So it detects the lack of presence of fiber. It detects this as a warning signal that literally produces explosive diarrhea. This is exactly the cause of disaster pants. As soon as you go on a fast or you stop feeding that good bacteria, that fiber, that resistant starch that it needs, you will start exploding out your ass. Literally, that's what happens. That's what happens when your bacteria stop producing butyrate.
The total surface area of our gut is maybe 3,000 square feet, counting all the little folds, larger than a tennis court. Yet only a single layer of cells separates our inner core from the outer chaos. The primary fuel that keeps this critical cell layer alive is a short-chain fatty acid called butyrate, which our good bacteria make from the fiber we eat. We feed the good bacteria in our gut, and they feed us right back. They take the prebiotics we eat like fiber, and in return provide the vital fuel source that feeds the cells that line our colon, a prototypical example of the kind of symbiosis between us and our gut flora. How important are these compounds, our good bacteria derived from fiber? There's a condition known as diversion colitis that frequently develops in segments of the colon or rectum after surgical diversion of the fecal stream, meaning if you skip a segment of the bowel, like with an ileostomy, so that food no longer passes through that section, it becomes inflamed and can start bleeding, breaking down, closing off. How frequently does this happen? Up to 100% of the time. But the inflammation uniformly disappears after you reattach it to the fecal flow.
See, this is exactly contrary to what everyone just intuitively assumes, which is that they always complain about, oh, the fiber, the roughage is literally, it's scratching and scraping up my bowels, it's hurting me on the inside, when the truth is that what actually happens inside is the exact opposite of that, of what you think you're experiencing. That's not the cause of it, it's the cure of it, because the fiber is literally what acts as a broom, and it literally sweeps the lining of your colon clean. Not only that, that fiber binds heavy metals, excess cholesterol, excess endogenous hormones such as estrogens. So it literally is the most important nutrient that we can get. It is absolutely an essential nutrient. For everyone saying that fiber is not an essential nutrient is living in a previous decade, or living in a previous century. They are not up to they're not thinking clearly. They're not thinking on the cutting edge of how important the fiber is. It's the key nutrient to overall longevity and health and well-being. It reduces risk of everything by means of this fiber and the processes that occur and knock down the line because of that. So the fiber is literally the key element of detoxification. It's the main and pretty much almost the only pathway of detoxification out of the body is through the bowels, only with fiber. As soon as you stop eating the fiber, that is the moment that you really stop detoxification, especially through the methylation cycle, as Goji Man just fully explained to us thoroughly and in depth. So literally nothing could be further from the truth with a high meat or any type of low carb diet. And not only that, but the saturated fat itself also promotes gut dysbiosis, which also is a key factor in causing leaky gut and irritable bowel, IBS, and Crohn's, as well as colon cancer and hormone estrogen-driven cancers as well. So this is a really interesting study that I came across. A high-fat diet leads obviously to obesity and metabolic syndromes and affects the functions and reproductive system. High-fat diet-induced microbiota dysbiosis and endotoxemia have been reported. So again, the endotoxins from the high-fat diet of the gut dysbiosis is producing endotoxemia, which is toxicity in the blood and in the lymphatic system. And emerging evidence demonstrated that gut microbiota dysbiosis is closely associated with a series of major chronic diseases such as obesity, diabetes, cancer, irritable bowel diseases, and neurodegenerative diseases. Everything that I've been talking about throughout this film here. Again, all
triggered by the high-fat diet. Significance of this study. What are the new... So those are the things that are already well known on this subject. But the new findings of this study, of course, again, this is just mouse data, but it provides very interesting questions to be followed through on human data, is that the high-fat diet, by mechanism of gut dysbiosis, actually reduces sperm count and motility and fertility as well. Clinically, the abundance of Bacteroides prevotella was negatively correlated with the subject's sperm motility, but the blood endotoxin level was positively correlated with the abundance of Bacteroides in the gut. Blood endotoxemia positively correlated with the abundance of Bacteroides in the gut. How might this study impact on clinical practice in the foreseeable future? The present study represents the first report in the field of gut microbes to functionally establish the linkage between imbalanced gut, or in other words, gut dysbiosis, from the high-fat diet, leading to impairment of male fertility. Which is why Sean Baker's sperm counts or testosterone levels are lower than a 93-year-old grandma, as in his sperm counts probably are as well. The results presented herein will shed new light on the cause of male infertility and the possibility of treating at least some of these patients by restoring gut microbial ecosystem.
We didn't know what caused it, maybe some kind of bacterial overgrowth or bad bacteria, or was it a nutritional deficiency of the lining of the colon due to the absence of the fiber needed to create the short-chain fatty acids? We didn't know until this study, where they cured the inflammation by bathing the lining in what it so desperately needed. Severe inflammation gone in just a few weeks. We feed the good bacteria in our gut, and they feed us right back. It makes sense that we have good bacteria in our gut that feed us, tries to keep us healthy. They got a pretty good thing going, right? It's warm and moist, and food just keeps magically coming down the pipe. But if we die, they lose out on all that. If we die, they die. So it's in their best evolutionary interest, right, to keep our colon happy. But there are bad bugs too, like cholera that cause diarrhea. They have a different strategy. The sicker they can make us, the more explosive the diarrhea, the better their chances of spreading to other people, into other colons. They don't care if we die because they don't intend on going down with the ship. So how does the body keep the good bacteria around while getting rid of the bad? Think about it. We have literally trillions of bacteria in our gut. And so our immune system must constantly maintain a balance between tolerance to good bacteria while attacking bad bacteria. If we mess up this fine balance and start attacking harmless bacteria, it could lead to inflammatory bowel disease, where we're in constant red alert attack mode. The mechanisms by which the immune system maintains this critical balance remained largely undefined until now. If you think about it, there's got to be a way for our good bacteria to signal to our immune system that they're the good guys, and that signal is butyrate. Butyrate suppresses the inflammatory reaction, tells our immune system to stand down. So butyrate may behave as a microbial signal to inform our immune system that the relative levels of good bacteria are within the desired range. Right? Butyrate calms the immune system down, saying in effect, all's well, you got the good guys on board, ultimately rendering the intestinal immune system hypo-responsive, meaning kind of accommodating to the beneficial bacteria. But in the absence of the calming effect of butyrate, our immune system is back in full force, attacking the bacteria within our gut, because they're obviously not the right ones since butyrate levels are so low. So we evolved to have butyrate suppress our immune reaction. So should our good bacteria ever get wiped out and bad bacteria take over, our immune system would be able to sense this and go on a rampage and destroy the invaders and continue rampaging until there are only good bacteria, creating butyrate to put the immune system back to sleep. OK, here's the critical piece. Here's why this all matters. What if we don't eat enough fiber? Remember, our good bacteria use fiber to create butyrate. So if we don't eat enough fiber, then we can't make enough butyrate. We could have lots of good bacteria, but if we don't feed them fiber, they can't make butyrate. Sensing such low levels of butyrate, our body mistakenly thinks our gut must be filled with bad bacteria and reacts accordingly. our body can mistake low fiber intake for having a population of bad bacteria in our gut. Our body doesn't know about processed food. It evolved over millions of years getting massive fiber intake. Even during the Paleolithic period, 100 grams of fiber a day. So on fiber-deficient Western diets, eating our Spam on Wonder Bread, right, when our body detects low butyrate levels in the gut, it doesn't think low fiber. As far as our body's concerned, there's no such thing as low fiber. It thinks bad bacteria. Because for millions of years, low butyrate means bad bacteria. So that's the signal for our body to go on the inflammatory offensive. So that's one reason why fiber can be so anti-inflammatory. One of the reasons fiber intake is critical for optimal health. Not fiber supplements, but whole plant foods. Fiber supplementation with something like Metamucil may not replicate the results seen with a diet naturally high in fiber.
I've had strange bowel movements. The last time I had something like this happen to me was during a major detox where I went 3 days without food or water, and my body expulsed, I guess that's the word, and my body produced, I believe, my liver produced yellow bile that actually stained the toilet bowl like if it was turmeric. If you've ever manipulated turmeric in the kitchen, if it touches anything, it's gonna stain. Well, it was a little bit like that, and so during that dry fast, I experienced this, and I just experienced this yesterday. So it looks like I'm having a really strong detox, which raises the question, I'd love to know if the carnivore diet is as detoxifying as it is nourishing, or is it more nourishing than it is detoxifying? Is it both? Is it both at the same time? Is it first detox, then nourishment? I'm really curious to find out all these answers, which we may never find out, but we'll see.
I'm eating a lot of fat. I'm eating bacon with all these wild game dishes, everything I eat bacon with, because I need fat.
You have to have fat with a lean. Lean and fat together make a perfect diet. A balanced diet. A balanced diet. Balanced diet. You have everything you need if you have both lean and fat.
You fuck around, have a seizure or heart attack, you better back the fuck up before you get smacked the fuck up. It's how we do it on our side.
And then I'm cooking everything in beef tallow.
Wow.
And then I'm getting like fatty meat too.
No butter or anything?
I'm using butter.
Okay.
But what the hell does methylation and demethylation have to do with Joe Rogan on a carnivore diet? So let me explain. The easiest way to think of methylation is to use the light switch analogy. So if you think that every process in your body requires the light switch to be on. So from extracting glucose from the food that you eat and converting this into ATP energy in your mitochondria, or how effectively your body detoxes, all of these processes need the light switch on. And that's all that methylation is. It's simply a process of controlling processes in the body with on and off switches. So methylation is switching on and demethylation is switching off. So when you eat fruits and vegetables, particularly dark leafy greens and beans, etc., you get lots of methyl groups. And these methyl groups help switch on and off a number of responses in the body, such as detoxification, hormone production, inflammation, energy production, immune responses, and also DNA repair. Now, if you have a lack of methyl groups in your body because you are following the carnivore diet, or you have a mutation in your MTHFR gene, then you are massively setting yourself up for health failure. And let me quickly explain this to you. Now, this slide I'm about to put up looks very complicated, but it's actually very straightforward. So please stay with me because it's super important that you know this information. So this diagram shows lots of different biochemical processes in the body, and this area right here is the methylation cycle. So at the top you have methionine, which is an essential amino acid and essential for the methylation pathway. So down here you can see homocysteine. So when methionine is converted into homocysteine, it releases a methyl group. So as we know, methylation is critical for all processes in the body. So when your body isn't methylating correctly, all
all of the various biochemical processes on this chart do not function properly. So for example, if you are not methylating properly, then you won't be producing enough glutathione, which is your body's master antioxidant. Another important way the body removes toxins is via sulfation in the liver, which again, this pathway will struggle if the methylation cycle isn't running properly. And down here you can also see that your happy hormones, so serotonin and dopamine, are also heavily dependent on the methylation cycle. So for example, if you have a healthy gut and diet but have an MTHFR mutation, then this could explain your anxiety and depression. So if we go back to this methylation cycle, methionine gets constantly converted to homocysteine and homocysteine to methionine. So if this process isn't functioning properly and you have high homocysteine levels, well, you are at an increased risk of heart disease and also cancer. So where does the MTHFR enzyme fit into all of this? Well, the MTHFR sits here. It stands for methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase. So as I said previously, the MTHFR enzyme adds methyl groups to molecules, etc. So as you can see in this methylation cycle, MTHFR adds a methyl group to homocysteine so that it can be converted back into methionine. So quite simply, everything on that screen, the whole methylation cycle, will not operate effectively with the absence of folate in Joe Rogan's diet. So in the short term, not too much of an issue, but over the longer term, those following a carnivore diet because of this methylation problem are at an increased risk of many different chronic diseases such as heart disease and cancer. So that's the end of today's video. I hope you all enjoyed, and as always, remember to look after your body because it's the only place you have to live. And I'll see you next time.
Butyrate, which is only produced by the healthy gut bacteria, which only feed on resistant starch, which is primarily found in beans and whole grains, almost exclusively in beans and whole grains, as well as some other high starchy, dense, fibrous foods. You won't even find it in hardly any fruits at all. And so get this even more. When those epithelial cells are starved of butyrate, it actually loosens the joints of the bowel wall, which literally creates leaky gut and irritable IBS, Crohn's, leaky gut, all of that stuff. All of that entire process begins with the lack of fiber. That is what causes the leaky gut and all of these bowel diseases, which is the underlying cause of almost all of these autoimmune diseases, which are triggered once the junctions in the bowel wall become separated and begin to leak toxins like oxalates, salicylates, histamines directly into the lymphatic system through the bowel wall, which then gets directly into the bloodstream and then begins to auto-intoxicate the body, where the immune cells then start to attack the body's own organs in these autoimmune diseases. All begins because of your lack of fiber intake, primarily your lack of beans and whole grains. Like if you at the point where you can't eat beans or whole grains, you're pretty much never going to be healthy, because that is the primary food source for all the longest living, healthiest populations on Earth, because of this mechanistic process, this entire chain of biochemical processes which happens and begins strictly because of the prebiotics, the prebiotic resistant starch and insoluble fiber content of these high starchy plant foods, which people are complaining about and can't eat. And when you start to get gas and bloating from trying to eat beans, you need to just gradually increase your intake of beans until wait 2 weeks, rather than doing the explosive diarrhea carnivore diet, which is going to kill you within a couple years, if not a lot less, if not a lot shorter time. Instead of doing that, then just eat a couple handfuls of beans, gradually increase your intake of beans until your microbiome adjusts, and then you're able to handle these high starchy foods and find yourself a good plant-based physician Don't go to a chiropractor for nutritional health. Do not go to an acupuncturist for nutritional health. Do not go to your local naturopath for nutritional health. Go find a plant-based physician from plantbaseddocs.org. Find a good plant-based physician, which most of them are all lifestyle medicine practitioners. They're not part of the Illuminati conspiracy out to kill you and depopulate the earth. These are the ones who are on the cutting edge of nutritional science, who are well versed in the science and will actually fix your underlying issues for good, for the long term. Go find you a plant-based physician at plantbaseddocs.org. Get rid of your naturopath, get rid of your acupuncturist, as far as nutritional health information goes at least. Get rid of your integrative medicine practitioner, your naturopath. Get rid of all of these clowns. Go to an actual plant-based physician and do that. And I want every one of you to send this video to Paul Saladino, to not Dr. Sean Baker, and you tell the leading low-carb and carnivore boss deadly disinformation. It's going to stop now. You send them over here and we're going to have a discussion about all of this. Because they're trying to deny all of this. They won't talk about it. They're trying to ignore it because they have no idea how any of it works.
There's another school of thought, though. Some people think that keto diet has the opposite effect of disaster pants and can actually back you up and cause constipation.
Which it can, yeah. So for a lot of people, if they are not eating much fiber, which a lot of people on a keto diet are not, I admit, now some people will just load up with non-starchy vegetables and maybe they're getting enough fiber. But if they're not, yeah, constipation is definitely a side effect. Now,
and really what it came down to is that the only thing that this diet has been scientifically proven to benefit is children with epilepsy.
And adults with epilepsy.
Okay.
It absolutely reduces seizure frequency for a lot of people.
Right.
That's a very small subset of the population.
Correct.
And again, I just, my heart, it just hurts for people because I know people are turning to this because they're desperate.
Right.
They're just desperate. They
Right.
want change and they're going to try anything. And the problem is that this anything could have some really serious risks along with some very uncomfortable side effects.
Right. I want to circle back to the malodorous side effect that I was talking about with Dr. Christy Cobb earlier in the show. And she brought up a study that referenced bacterial vaginosis. And that is what they think that the best guess anyway.
Correct,
Is that
right.
that would be what the actual keto crotch is.
Yes. Trying to keep a straight face when you say that.
Right. What researchers found was that a person who eats foods that are rich in calcium and folate and vitamin A have a reduced risk of developing bacterial vaginosis.
Calcium, folate, and vitamin A? That makes me think dark leafy greens.
I know. And here we have the Fiber Queen fitting on the Disaster Pants show.
Yay.
I don't see a lot of upside to this diet. I honestly don't. Unless you have epilepsy, I'm not seeing a whole lot of upside to this.
And even if you have epilepsy, the goal is to get people back off of this way of eating as quickly as possible.
Right.
So this is not, if someone needs it for long-term use, it can be done, but this is sort of the last resort measure, not the first thing that people try.
I'm a 27-year-old mother of a beautiful 2-year-old daughter. I'm the CEO of 2 companies, one being Don't Eat That, my health company, and I'm the creator of the Lion Diet.
Okay, so at worst, Michaela Peterson is deliberately just flat out lying to everyone, and at best, she's being dishonest.
I've successfully treated myself for multiple chronic severe idiopathic disorders. I've been unmedicated since drastic dietary intervention in 2015, and I'm completely symptom-free.
It makes me wonder, what else are you lying about, Michaela? At the end of the day, all we have to go on is your word, your own anecdotal testimony, and you haven't provided us with any scientific evidence that, your carnivore diet, your lion diet, has any efficacy in treating or curing autoimmune disorders or neuropsychiatric issues like anxiety or depression. So if all we have to go on is your word, and you've literally admitted to lying, why should we trust you? And you do have to recognize that Michaela is trying to make money off of all of you with this ridiculous carnivore or lion diet thing. She has a financial incentive to lie to all of you, and I'm sure she's smart enough to recognize that it sounds a lot more enticing to say, hey guys, I've suffered from all of these really serious issues my entire life, but as soon as I went on the lion diet, cured, all gone, I'm on no medications anymore. Rather than saying the truth that, after switching to the carnivore diet, I still have all of these problems. They've only gotten better, but I still need to take medications to try and manage these problems I have. So the truth doesn't sell as well as lies, and I think that could explain why Michaela's lying.
Then when I was 21, my skin started to break down. I was dying. I'm not anymore. I'm thriving. And this is me now. This is me on the lion diet. The lion diet is strict, and it'll fix your problems and turn you into a boss human.
So notice how, again, she didn't provide any scientific evidence for her claims. She didn't even provide evidence that this diet benefited her in any meaningful way. She didn't provide her own medical report stating that she's been in remission of these autoimmune disorders or neuropsychiatric disorders she's been suffering from. No, all she showed was a flattering photo of her wearing underwear. So we are to believe that this lion diet can treat or even cure serious autoimmune and neuropsychiatric disorders like anxiety and depression because you look good in underwear. And we already know that you have lied about treating your neuropsychiatric disorders and being off all medications. So why should anyone take you seriously?
I've seen thousands of people recover using this diet. It sounds crazy, but it's true.
Well, there's an old saying, Michaela, if it sounds too good to be true, then you're probably full of
It involves only eating ruminant animal meat. Organs are fine. High fatty cuts, like ribeye or ribs, salt and water. It's as simple as ruminant meat, salt, and water.
It's also important to note that these two videos are only a few days apart from each other. So when she made this lion diet video, she knew full well that her dad was on medications to deal with his mood disorder and that he was having a hell of a hard time getting off of his medications and he needed rehab. So she deliberately lied, claiming that she cured her father's mood disorders even though he was still on medications and he was trying to get off of medications just so she could promote her stupid diet and make a quick buck off of you. And what's also funny is, in this lion diet video, she didn't mention her mother. Why would that be? She only mentioned her father.
These people they think that they have like this secret that the entire scientific field doesn't have. And so for Bart K saying like, yeah, you have to throw it all out. And it's like you need to look in the mirror and realize that you're the one that actually has no idea what he's talking about. Which is, how is that possible if he was a senior science? I mean, it doesn't make any sense unless these are just chills. They are just, it has to be. Because you can't be a senior scientist and say that, literally the entire peer review process itself is, and instead then appeal to anecdotes. He's like, we've got all these anecdotes, so this is what's most important. It's insane. It's literally insanity to think that the least amount of evidence is somehow now the best evidence, and you can't acknowledge the best evidence because this weaker form of evidence is somehow all that matters, and it's ridiculous.
Opinion based on what I have seen and my understanding of physiology, which is significant. A professional opinion based on my very, very significant understanding of the physiology and the science. I don't need evidence for it, Michelle.
Of course you do.
If I am a competent scientist, which I am, that qualifies me to profess in my areas of expertise about the acceptability and veracity of the scientific inference such that it exists in my area. I am now entitled to my opinion as a highly trained, very successful, former senior academic with a very, very impressive CV, because it clearly says, in and of its own disclosure statement, none of what's in here tells us anything about nothing. That's the first truthful statement I've heard coming out of academia regarding nutritional science pretty much ever.
The research on meat or on plant-based diets or on any form of nutritional science, all of it has its flaws. There's no such thing as a scientific study that is perfect.
The evidence that would be required to support the assertions that are flying around there from both sides is not there. Nobody has any evidence.
Fantastic.
That includes me.
So, is there?
Yes, there is, absolutely.
Okay, show me the evidence then. Show me the evidence. How do you explain the correlation? Where's your evidence then to support the fact that withdrawing plants from anybody's diet will make them better of any inflammatory condition? Right? If you were, let's say, a general practitioner or a cardiologist or a cancer specialist, and you had a patient sitting in front of you with a whole series of health concerns, if you had no science whatsoever,
which most of those individuals don't.
Well, yeah. Assuming that this specialist has knowledge of the data,
in which case they would quit being a physician.
Well, then you get into a situation where no one can be treated.
Nobody on either side of this argument has anything remotely. So I mean, don't pin it on me and say you have no evidence. Okay, I don't need any evidence. There is clear inference that a diet that is lacking in whole protein and fat soluble bioavailable minerals and vitamins of the kind you find in animal products, if you keep those things out of your diet, if you don't supplement those things effectively, you will run into a problem sooner or later. There is clear evidence of that.
Based on what? You've got evidence.
Well, clearly hasn't done any research at all in terms of.
Where's your evidence? Where is your evidence?
You're a stuck record, Michelle. You really are absolutely mired in your own shit, aren't you? You're up to your neck in your own excrement. You can't see the forest for the trees.
You think the inflammation is coming from plants, from oxalates and so on and so forth, but yet there's no evidence to support that. Equally, you've said before, there is no evidence that to support a meat-based diet, except anecdote.
You need to be very clear.
So where are we then?
You need to be
clear. Well, show me the evidence.
Well, I am perfectly entitled to come online and say, look, here's where the science falls short, and that's what I do. Here's why idiots like such and such shouldn't be coming online and saying this, that, and the other thing. Here's the exact reasons why. And if you actually bother to watch any of my videos, Michelle, you'll see that I give very detailed, very clear explanations of exactly where the errors are being made in terms of the interpretation of the actual inference, the actual stats, the numbers, the data that was collected by these people in these studies. You know,
as the great leader, right? Remember that you're the great leader of nutrition as a watchdog, right? How can you possibly begin to say that the people with the lowest cholesterol levels are the people least likely to die? We've thrown out nutrition science. We are left with what we can glean from your knowledge.
Right.
So show me the evidence that you base that knowledge upon. Show me the evidence.
You know, once there is sufficient anecdotal stuff that we can start doing the science, then there will be some evidence to say, well, look, here is an inference. There is plenty of anecdote that people can go to on either side of the argument if they want to. And I say all power to them.
If you're collecting anecdotal evidence like the likes that Sean Baker does on meatheals.com, then I'm sorry, if you're trying to say that is publishable evidence, I don't know what to tell you. You haven't shown anybody anybody any convincing evidence whatsoever?
Just not even investigated.
The fetid, stinking from Chorley, a complete moron. I'm not fucking stupid, believe it or not. What fucking evidence do I need, you syphilitic cunt? I haven't made any fucking claims, you lying motherfuckers, cockwombles. So what we have here is a mad, rabid, fat, unwell, mentally deranged, mentally deficient, self-poisoning veg. You ridiculous, desperate, fat, ugly, syphilis. She got absolutely f***ing creamed. Incoherent, random words and sentences that had no f***ing meaning of any kind. And then I'd go, pooh, shit. I basically punched her bloody. I beat her senseless. Just go and watch the fucking thing. Pew! That's the end of that. Pew! 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 Fucking hole. You've got no fucking idea what you're talking about, asshole. Fat cunt. You don't even know what science is. Piss yourself with delight and go pink in the face and giggle like a fucking demented fat school child. Fuck off and die, you hag.
Well, I'll let you be the judge of who was more professional in those clips and which person put forth the more compelling case that their opinion, their professional opinion, is the more valuable, and the diet that they have an opinion on is likely going to produce the better health outcome. So I'll let you make your mind up there, and I'll see you in the next video.
So, what is truth? You know, whenever you bring up this topic to the average person, we'll say, well, what's truth anyway? And again, just like I tried to demystify the concept of the occult, I really want to try to demystify this concept of truth, because too many people have a completely mystified notion of what truth is. It's way over the top, it's way too complicated, and it doesn't really capture what truth means. All right? We have to simplify. First thing is, truth is simple. It's not complex. It's not overly mystified. It's very simple. It's something that is objective, meaning that it is not based on the perceptions of human beings. It's not based on thought. Truth is not based on how we think. It's not based on how we feel, period. It's not based on our perceptions. It exists independently of our perceptions. All right? Human perception is capable of wavering wildly off the course of truth. Truth does not waver. Truth stays right where it is, regardless of whether you recognize or perceive it or not. It is simply that which is. It's always been there. Like I said, it's always been there. It's always going to be there. It is there now. It is simply that which is. It is that which has occurred and is occurring. Truth is that which has occurred in the past and is occurring right now in the present moment. And that's it. That's all that it is. Very demystified conceptualization of truth, which is lacking in a lot of spiritual studies. All right, people want to make it the totality of the knowledge of the mind of God. You know, it's too mystified of a concept, and it's also too complexified. You'll never get to the essence of what it really means with that kind of a concept in your mind. Most people will say, well, if that's what it is, why bother? We'll never get to that, you know? And that's what stops people from moving forward in pursuit of truth in many cases. So keep this demystified concept in mind as we move forward. The second part of truth is that it is singular. There is no such thing as my truth, his truth, her truth, their truth. There is only the truth. There is only one way that things have been and actually are now. Okay? The past cannot be changed. It's what was. That's what led to the present, what is. That's not up for interpretation. That's what has occurred. Okay? There's only one way that happened, because it's already done. It is the past. All right? So there's only one way that things actually are. We can either align our perceptions to it, or we could not align our perceptions to it. Period. all right? And that exists independently from perception. It's a very hard thing for the ego to hear. I recognize that. This is one of the main points of contention that many people will take up with my work as well. But let me see if I could explain how truth is different than perception. Okay? This is a real simple model, this graph, okay? And I try to keep my graphics as simple as possible as well. If you look at these white lines here as just being a simple representation or a model of truth, which does not waver, which is just the way things are, the actual truth of the matter, okay? And then you look at these waveforms in different colors as a person's perceptions, okay, and how the perception is coming into contact with truth at these points. All right? Now, this is called a low frequency wave. A low frequency means the wave oscillates about its axis less frequently than a higher frequency wave. All right? So a low frequency perception or consciousness is going to be in contact with truth at much lower frequency, less frequently. All right? So this wavelength of light, all right, is lower frequency than this wavelength of light. This person's consciousness, if we're likening this model to a human consciousness, would be low frequency, low consciousness. This person, their consciousness has been stepped up to a higher frequency. It is now in more alignment with truth. So the person's consciousness is intersecting with that which does not waver much more frequently, hence a higher frequency. This person's consciousness is intersecting with it at many, many, many different places along the line. If you were to take that and go to infinite frequency, you would have a line, or in other words, a line meant with truth. You would be intersecting the truth at all times and places. Your perception would not waver from that which is. It would recognize that which is readily and accurately. And that's what I'm talking about by perception. And that's what determines whether consciousness is low or high, whether it is in alignment with that which is, in recognition of that which is or not. And not everybody is going to be there all the time. Even the person with very high consciousness, their perception may slip out of alignment with truth, but it will do so less frequently than other people's perception slipping out of alignment with truth. Some people live their entire lives and barely ever touch that white line at all. Okay? But the point here is that perception is not reality. What our work here on the earth is to align our perception to reality. And an ideology that makes this almost impossible, that unfortunately is on the rise and is propagated nonstop, 24 hours a day by the New Age communities in today's world, is known as solipsism. Now, how many people have ever heard the term solipsism before? That's phenomenal. I've never asked that question and had a room full of people, give a response like that the vast majority, about 90% of the room has heard the term. That's a good sign, actually. Maybe people are becoming aware of what this is and the danger that it's doing. Let's just look at the etymology of the word for a moment. Solipsism comes from the Latin adjective solus, meaning alone, and the Latin pronoun ipse, meaning self. So if we put them together, it's all alone by oneself. I'm the only one here, in other words. Okay, everything revolves around me. All right, it's the ideology that only one's mind is ever sure to exist. That knowledge of anything that's outside of one's mind is unsure. I can't possibly know that any objective truth exists because I'm only experiencing my consciousness subjectively. So how could anything about the external world or its workings truly be known? Or certainly even if I were to know it, how could I possibly communicate it with anybody else? That's what solipsism is, the idea that there is no such thing as truth. Truth is just totally a subjective thing that exists only in the mind. It's nothing objective. Nothing can actually be known It's all just random perception and whims. That's all, And if that's the ideology, I would suggest you could be led to buy anything, to buy into absolutely anything, which is why dark occultists want to propagate this ideology. I mean, desperately want to propagate it. I was involved in the dark occult in my past, and I'm telling you, they themselves consider this a sin for themselves. They never, ever, ever want to fall into this ideology for themselves. So a dark occultist would communicate to other dark occultists and say, don't ever buy into solipsism, all right? But propagate it to everybody out there that you want to control. They want to propagate this ideology, not buy into it themselves. And they do it very effectively. And they're doing that through the New Age movement. Solipsism is both a false religion and a defining hallmark of spiritual infancy. This is what it means to be completely asleep, in other words, to be completely unconscious, not having started the journey in consciousness at all. So departing from this diseased ideology is a surefire sign that you're beginning to awaken. Okay, it's a surefire sign of the very beginning of human maturity and spiritual development. Those who are truly awake fully understand that objective reality absolutely does exist and that the truth absolutely can be known. Truth is knowable. The universe was not put here to torment us endlessly, such that we can never know anything and constantly be tormented by that fact. If that's your worldview, it's a diseased and poisoned worldview. Truth is here. It always has been here, and we are capable of discovering it and knowing it. Unfortunately, most of humanity is trapped in what I call the mental schism, where they're totally imbalanced toward one brain hemisphere or another, and that imbalanced dynamic is held in place through mind control. The intellect, the masculine component of consciousness, if that's way too overused and we're always living in that state of imbalance, if that part of the personality or that part of the brain is chronically dominant, then what manifests are conditions like rigid skepticism, not taking in any new information or evidence, okay? What I call scientism. This is the worship of science as a religion, as the only possible medium for truth to be known, okay? Atheism, solipsism, moral relativism, which we're going to talk a lot about later, social Darwinism, eugenics, and authoritarianism. And then if we're in total right brain imbalance toward the feminine hemisphere of the brain, if that part of the brain is chronically dominant and we have no balance with the left brain as well, will manifest conditions in the personality such as total naivete, blind belief, religious extremism, just being a blind follower or believer. Solipsism can also manifest when you're in right brain imbalance, just as left brain imbalance. Unworthiness, self-loathing, addictive personalities fall into this category of the brain as well. And then perhaps most dangerous, following orders and being a willing slave, not resisting when there's dominance that is being exerted over you by others. So this knowing the true self is about getting out of those mental schisms. You're not in one of those forms of imbalance or the other. You're in holistic thought, or what I call free think. What will also keep you in a state of being able to be controlled and not knowing the true self is a worldview schism. And again, too many people are in one of these sides or another as well. The worldview of randomness, that everything is just a cosmic accident. The universe is a grand accident. There's no creator. There's no underlying intelligence in nature. Okay? Everything was just a cosmic accident for no purpose. There's no such thing as the spirit. There's no such thing as morals that are true, that are objective. There's no such thing as natural law, which we're going to talk about a lot. There's no purpose to existence other than to continue to exist. Survival. What does that sound like? Somebody who's rooted in the R complex of the brain because of their left brain hemispherical imbalance. Hallmarks of scientism, hallmarks of atheism, hallmarks of totalitarianism. The opposite form of worldview schism imbalance is determinism. The fact that there is no moral outcry about all drug laws, about all tax laws, okay, is proof that people are entrapped in a state of moral relativism in their own minds. And this idea is satanic, okay? And I'm not asking you to believe that. I'm telling you because, again, my background comes from dark occultism. I know what I know largely because I worked with the people who are in control of the world for 10 years of my life. And I'm telling you, moral relativism is one of the main foundational tenets of Satanism. It is one of the foundational tenets of the satanic religion, which is what's ultimately controlling this world. All right? If you embrace moral relativism, the idea that man gets to decide what's right or wrong for himself, you're going into a prison and you're staying there. That is the law of freedom. Get used to it and get over it. Understand that that's just how the universal laws of consciousness work. And as soon as we understand that, we'll start building a world that's going to be increasing in freedom because the people of that society will be increasing in true morality. Moral relativism is guaranteeing the slavery of the human species. It's a very dangerous trend. And it's not just being propagated by the powers that should not be in this world, or the dark occult. It is being propagated by the so-called New Age movement. The claim that the difference between right and wrong, it's dualistic. Mark, you're being so dualistic. No, I'm exercising discernment and judgment over what will move us forward as a species and what will not. Over what will lead to freedom and what cannot lead to freedom. Such thinking, moral relativism, is the very dynamic that is enslaving our species. And until we are out of it, we are not going to be out of the chains that bind us. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to take a break right there. That's the end of our first section. Thank you.
And I'm sorry I didn't want to make this too long. I wanted to make this a short video, but you know, like as always, you cannot scathe the surface of this stuff. And as always, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to watch my videos. If you enjoy this information, please share it around with anyone who you think might also appreciate the information. It's my greatest passion and my purpose and my mission is to continue to produce genuinely inspired and meaningful, uplifting content. We haven't even begun to scratch the surface of just how much info is ready and waiting to be produced. I can't even keep up with the amount of output, or let alone the amount of writing that is coming through. We haven't even gotten started yet. We are just warming up. And so we just need to take care of this business, guy, because as it stands right now, I am not able to do this full time. I simply am not making enough to pay off the amount of effort that goes into these. We have to meet these minimum goals. Otherwise, I can't do this. Please help me continue in this mission. And check out the merch in the links below. Help support my channel that way, or support my channel on patreon.com/liftingtheveil. Links in the description below. And I will see you guys in the next video. There is so much more content coming up. First in the lineup is the 6-hour film that I'm going to divide up about the New World Order agenda and the truth about veganism. It will be a part 2 of my other viral film that went out, so the truth about veganism. So stay tuned for that next. It's almost finished. I'm just polishing up. I want to make sure I cover all the details, so it's very in-depth.